Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on What If Naruto Awakens, the most rare and powerful Egyptian bloodline. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Ankh in the alleyway. The Silenk. In apartment 3B was not a peaceful absence of sound, but a living entity. It was a thick, syrupy silence that clung to the thin, threadbare blanket and seeped into the very marrow of the boy huddled beneath it. It was a silence composed of 100 ignored sounds, the mournful drip of a leaky pipe in the kitchen sink, each drop a tiny hammer striking an anvil of loneliness, the low, asthmatic groan of the building's old timbers settling into the damp earth, the distant, hollow echo of laughter from the street below, a sound so alien it might as well have been from another world. For Naruto Uzumaki, aged 6, this silence was the most familiar companion he had ever known. He lay perfectly still on his futon, his breathing a shallow, controlled whisper, listening not with his ears but with his entire being. He was practicing a game he had invented, a game of invisibility. If he made no sound, if he took up no space, if he drew no attention, perhaps the silence would swallow him whole and he could finally disappear. The sun, a reluctant smudge of pale gray behind a shroud of perpetual cloud cover, did little to pierce the gloom of his small room. Light was a visitor here, not a resident. It crept in through the single grime-streaked window, illuminating a universe of dancing dust motes in its brief, slanted pilgrimage across the floor before being devoured by the shadows in the corners. The room was a testament to stark functionality, stripped of any warmth or personality. A low table, a single chair, a small chest for his identical orange jumpsuits, and the futon. There were no photographs on the walls, no childish drawings taped to the small, sputtering refrigerator, no toys spilling from a box. It was less a home and more a holding cell, a place to exist between the harsh glares of the world outside. He had tried once, a year ago, to liven the place up. A pot of flowers he had painstakingly rescued from a refuse bin behind the Yamanaka flower shop. It had been vibrant, a defiant splash of purple against the oppressive beige. It had lasted 2 days before the landlord, a man whose face seemed perpetually caught in a sneer, had tossed it from the balcony, complaining about the mess. Naruto had not tried again. Some lessons, especially those taught by adults, were learned quickly. He swung his legs out from under the blanket, the worn wooden floorboards cool against the soles of his feet. The game of invisibility was over. Hunger, a far less subtle companion than silence, was making its presence known with a dull ache in his stomach. It meant a trip outside. It meant navigating the labyrinth. He dressed methodically, pulling on the garish orange jumpsuit that served as both his daily attire and a beacon for the village's scorn. He had once asked the old man, the third Hokage, why he had to wear such a loud color. Hiruzen had smiled a sad, weary smile and said it was a strong, happy color for a strong, happy boy. Naruto, even at 6, had understood the hollowness of the words. It was a cage of color, a uniform that announced his presence, ensuring he could be easily watched, easily tracked, easily ostracized. It was the opposite of invisible. Opening the door was like breaking the surface of water after holding one's breath for too long. The silence of his apartment was replaced by the cacophony of the world. The scent of damp concrete, stale cooking oil, and something vaguely sour filled his nostrils. He locked the door behind him, another lesson learned the hard way after his meager food allowance had been stolen, and began the day. Sent down the creaking external staircase. 2 floors down, a woman was hanging her laundry. She saw him, and her hands, previously nimble and efficient, suddenly froze. Her eyes, a moment before placid, hardened into chips of obsidian. She did not speak. She did not have to. She turned her back to him, a gesture as loud as any shout, and waited until the sound of his footsteps had faded before resuming her task. Naruto didn't flinch. He simply observed, catalogued, and continued. It was data. The world was full of it. The streets of Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves, were slick with a fine, persistent drizzle that had been falling for 3 days straight. It was a miserable, soul-dampening rain that leached the color from the world, turning the vibrant reds of the storefront banners into a muddy rust and the cheerful greens of the village's iconic rooftops into a shade of mossy despair. Puddles had formed in the depressions of the cobblestone streets, reflecting the bruised purple of the sky. Most villagers hurried along their way, heads ducked under umbrellas, their faces grim. Naruto had no umbrella. He walked with his head held high, the cold rain plastering his ky blonde hair to his scalp and trickling down his neck. He had learned that showing weakness, like shivering or hunching his shoulders, was an invitation for a different kind of storm. He kept to the edges of the main thoroughfare, a small orange ghost flitting through the periphery of society. He watched people with an intensity that would have been unnerving if anyone had cared to notice. He saw the way the baker's wife would smile at a child buying a sweet roll, a genuine, crinkling smile that reached her eyes. Then he saw the way that same smile would vanish, frozen and chipped away into a polite, brittle mask the moment her gaze passed over him. He saw the way two chunin, chatting idly by a weapon shop, would unconsciously shift their weight, their hands moving closer to the kunai pouches on their hips as he drew near. He saw the way a group of children playing ninja in a park would suddenly fall silent, their game forgotten, their eyes following him with a mixture of fear and contempt they had learned from their parents. He absorbed it all, every subtle shift in posture, every fleeting expression, every whispered word that the wind carried to his ears. Demon, fox brat, look, it's him. The words were like stones, and though he had built a formidable wall inside himself, each one left a small, invisible bruise. His destination was a small, unassuming grocery store on the far side of the village. One where the owner was merely indifferent rather than openly hostile. The man, a balding elder with cloudy eyes, would take his money and give him his goods without a word. His face a mask of practiced neutrality. It was the best Naruto could hope for. As he rounded a corner, his path was blocked by a trio of older boys from the academy. They were bigger, broader, and radiated the casual cruelty of those who have never known true hardship. The one in the middle, a boy with a perpetually smug look named Kenji, stepped forward. Well, Kenji sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Look what the rain washed up. Going to buy some food, demon. Naruto said nothing. He simply looked at Kenji, his cerulean eyes flat and unblinking. He assessed the situation. 3 of them, 1 in front, 2 flanking. The alley to his left was a dead end. The street behind him was empty. His escape route was cut off. This was not a random encounter. It was an ambush. What's the matter, fox brat? Cat got your tongue. The boy on the right taunted, stepping closer. He's probably too stupid to talk, added the third, a lanky boy with a cruel smile. Naruto's mind worked with a cold, detached clarity. He could run. They were bigger, but he was faster. He had to be. He could try to dodge past Kenji. The odds of success were approximately 40%. There was a 60% chance they would grab him. He could fight. His taijutsu was clumsy, self-taught, and ineffective against 3 larger opponents. The odds of victory were less than 5%. The most logical course of action was de-escalation. He took a half step back, trying to signal non-aggression. It was the wrong move. It was a sign of weakness. Kenji's smug look sharpened into a predator's grin. Scared, are we? You should be. He lunged. Naruto dodged, his small frame twisting with surprising agility, but the lanky boy was ready. A foot shot out, tripping him. Naruto hit the wet cobblestones hard, the impact jarring his teeth and sending a spray of muddy water into the air. The breath was knocked from his lungs in a painful gasp. Before he could recover, they were on him. A foot slammed into his side, hard and unforgiving. Pain, sharp and electric, lanced through his ribs. He curled into a ball, his arms instinctively coming up to protect his head. Not so tough now, are you? Kenji's voice was a triumphant sneer from somewhere above him. Another kick landed, this one in the small of his back. A grunt of pain escaped his lips. The laughter of the other 2 joined in, a harsh, grating sound that was worse than the kicks. They were enjoying this. That was another piece of data. Their goal wasn't just to hurt him, it was to savor his suffering. Time seemed to stretch and distort. The sensation of the cold, wet stone against his cheek. The rhythmic thud of feet against his body, the sharp, coppery taste of blood in his mouth as he bit his lip to keep from crying out. He focused on the pain, letting it fill his mind. Pushing everything else away. Pain was a signal. It meant he was still alive. Then, a new voice cut through the haze, deep and slurred with alcohol. What's this? Some brats having a go at the local pest. Naruto felt the kick stop. Through the curtain of his wet hair, he saw a new pair of feet, clad in standard-issue shinobi sandals. He looked up. A man in a chunin flak jacket. His face flushed and his breath reeking of sake, was swaying slightly as he looked down at the scene. Hope, a stupid and treacherous emotion, flickered in Naruto's chest. An adult, a shinobi, he would stop them. The chunin chuckled, a low, guttural sound. Good work, boys. Teach the monster a lesson. He looked down at Naruto, his eyes filled with a swimming, unfocused hatred that was far more potent than the boy's childish bullying. You're the reason my brother died during the attack. My wife, too, a filthy demon in human skin. The flicker of hope died, smothered under a wave of chilling despair. This was different. This wasn't a game anymore. The boys had been cruel. This man was a vessel of pure, unadulterated loathing. Get him up, the chunin ordered. Kenji and his friend hauled Naruto to his feet. His arms pinned painfully behind his back. He was trembling now, not from the cold, but from a deep, primal fear. The man's eyes were locked on his, and in their depths, Naruto saw something that terrified him more than any physical blow. He saw a man looking at an object, a thing to be broken. Let's see if we can't finish what the fourth started, the chunin slurred. His hand reaching for the kunai at his hip. The polished steel gleamed with a malevolent light even in the dim, rainy afternoon. The world narrowed to that single point of light, the sharp tip of the blade. This was it. The data was clear. The probability of survival was now 0. His life, a short, brutal, and lonely existence, was about to end in a muddy puddle on an anonymous street. And in that moment of absolute certainty, something inside him broke. It was not a snap of rage. It was not a surge of defiant power. It was a quiet, profound surrender. A letting go. He had spent his entire life fighting, pushing back against the tide of hatred, trying to stay afloat. Now, exhausted, bruised, and utterly alone, he finally stopped struggling. He let the tide take him. He closed his eyes. I'm tired, was his last coherent thought. I just want it to be quiet. The universe, it seemed, was listening. There was no sound, no explosion, no cry of power. There was only light. It did not erupt from him. It became him. One moment, he was a small, broken boy in the grip of his tormentors. The next, he was the epicenter of a silent, luminous detonation. It was not the harsh, burning light of a fire jutsu, nor the crackling energy of a lightning blade. It was a light that felt ancient, pure, and absolute. A soft, warm, golden radiance that expanded outwards in a perfect sphere. It had no heat, yet it was warmer than any sun. It had no physical substance, yet it possessed an undeniable force. The chunin's hand, holding the kunai, was the first to be touched by the expanding wave. The instant the light washed over it, the man's face went slack. The focused hatred in his eyes dissolved, replaced by a vast, placid emptiness. The kunai slipped from his nerveless fingers, clattering uselessly onto the cobblestones. The light moved up his arm, over his body, and through his head. He did not scream. He did not even grunt. All the rage, the grief, the drunken fury, all the complex, jagged emotions that made him who he was, were not burned away or suppressed. They were unmade. The intricate tapestry of his personality was carefully, painlessly, and utterly unraveled, leaving only the blank canvas behind. Kenji and the other boys, still holding Naruto's arms, suffered the same fate. The light swept through them, and the smug cruelty, the casual malice, the childish arrogance, it all simply ceased to be. Their grips loosened, their jaws fell slack, and their eyes became vacant, staring at nothing. They were left standing, breathing, their hearts beating, but the person that had been inside was gone. Erased from existence as neatly as a line of chalk wiped from a slate. The golden sphere of light expanded, washing over the grimy brick walls of the alley, silencing the drip of the rain, stilling the very air. For a single, eternal moment, the dark, wet alley was transformed into a sacred antechamber, a space of profound and terrifying stillness. And at its heart was Naruto. He was no longer trembling. His eyes were open, but he wasn't looking at the catatonic figures around him. He was looking inward, at the new, silent, sun-drenched landscape that had just bloomed within his soul. The Kyuubi, the great nine-tailed demon fox sealed within him, a creature of pure, malevolent chakra, felt the light and recoiled, not in pain, but in sheer, instinctual terror. This was a power antithetical to its very nature. A power of order so absolute that its own chaotic existence was threatened not with destruction, but with oblivion. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the light receded, folding back into Naruto until it was gone. The rain began to fall again. The world's sounds rushed back in. The four figures around him remained standing for a moment longer before Ps-ing like puppets with their strings cut, slumping into the puddles in a heap of damp cloth and empty flesh. They were not dead. They were not injured. They were simply blank. Naruto stood alone in the alley, the rain washing the blood from his lip. He was not the same. The frantic, desperate energy, the yearning for acknowledgement, the gnawing loneliness, it was all still there, but it was different now. It was buried under a new layer, a bedrock of calm, ancient silence. He felt vast. He felt old. He looked at his hands, turning them over. They looked the same, small and smudged with dirt. But they felt different. They felt like they could hold the sun. He felt a strange pull, a gentle but insistent tug, not towards any place he knew, but towards a feeling. The feeling of home, a home he had never had. Ignoring the crumpled bodies of his former attackers, he turned and walked out of the alley, his steps steady and sure, and headed back to his apartment. The world had not changed, but he had. And that had changed everything. Back in the sterile silence of apartment 3B, the world felt muted, distant. The earlier encounter in the alley seemed less like a memory and more like a dream he had observed from a great height. He did not feel fear or triumph, only a profound sense of dislocation. He moved with a newfound economy of motion, his body guided by an instinct that hadn't existed an hour ago. He walked across the room, his gaze sweeping over the familiar, drab surroundings until it settled on a particular spot on the floor. A single floorboard, just to the left of his futon. It looked identical to all the others, but to his new senses, it was screaming. It thrummed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy, a warmth that cut through the apartment's chill. He knelt, his small fingers tracing the edges of the board. There was no notch, no handle. He simply placed his palm flat against the wood, and a flicker of the same golden energy that had bloomed in the alley, now faint and controlled, pulsed from his hand. There was a soft click, and the floorboard rose a fraction of an inch. Beneath it was not a hollow space, but a small, recessed compartment, lined with what looked like dark, preserved leather. Nestled inside, on a bed of faded red silk, was a single object, a flat, palm-sized tablet of smooth, black stone. It was obsidian, polished to a mirror-like sheen, and cool to the touch. Etched into its surface was a single, intricate symbol. It was not a Japanese kanji or any character he had ever seen. It was a complex hieroglyph, a pictograph of breathtaking elegance and complexity. It depicted an ankh, the ancient symbol of life, but with a sun disk resting at its apex where the loop should be. The symbol seemed to hum, to vibrate with a latent p-or that made the air around it feel thick and heavy, like the moment before a lightning strike. He knew this symbol. He had never seen it before in his life, yet he knew it with a certainty that transcended memory. It was a word, a concept. It was a key. Hesitantly, he reached into the compartment and lifted the stone tablet. The moment his skin made contact with the cool obsidian, the world dissolved. His small, dingy apartment vanished, replaced by a torrent of sensory information, a flood of memories that were not his own. Visions of a sky dominated by a sun of impossible size and brilliance, pouring down rays of liquid gold onto a land of endless, ochre desert. Pyramids of white limestone that speared the heavens, their capstones of gleaming electrum seeming to merge with the sun itself. A great, serpentine river, its waters the color of lapis lazuli, teeming with life. He saw people with skin the color of rich earth, their eyes lined with kohl, wearing white linen robes. They moved with a serene grace, their faces calm and knowing. He heard a language that was not spoken but sung, a series of harmonic tones that resonated directly in the soul. He felt a profound sense of peace, of order, of being part of a great cosmic design that was perfect and eternal. Images flooded his mind, concepts that had no words in his own language. Kemet, the Black Land, the name of this sun-drenched kingdom. Heka, not magic or jutsu, but the fundamental force of creation, the grammar of the gods that allowed one to command reality itself. Ka, the soul, the eternal, energetic duplicate of the body, a thing that could be seen, touched, and understood. Duat, the spiritual realm, the underworld that was not a place of punishment, but of transition and judgment. The flood of information was overwhelming, a tsunami of knowledge that threatened to drown his own small, 6-year-old consciousness. But the silent, calm bedrock that had formed within him held firm. It acted as a filter, a library, sorting the information, filing it away not in his brain, but in his very spirit. He did not learn these things, he remembered them. They were his birthright. The vision faded, and he found himself back on his knees in his apartment, the black tablet still clutched in his hand. He was gasping for breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. The tablet no longer hummed. Its energy had passed into him. He looked at the hieroglyph again. He could read it now. It did not just mean life, or sun. It was a declaration, a statement of being, the soul whose life is the sun. It was a name. It was his name. A wave of exhaustion washed over him, deeper than any he had ever felt. His body, having endured a beating and a world-shattering awakening, could take no more. He barely had the NGTH to crawl onto his futon before unconsciousness claimed him, his small hand still loosely holding the key to a legacy he was only just beginning to comprehend. He did not know how long he slept. When he awoke, it was not to the familiar gray light of dawn, but to a gentle, rhythmic tapping at his door. He sat up, his mind clear, the dull ache in his body a distant memory. The apartment felt different. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by a quiet, expectant stillness. He got up and opened the door. On the other side stood a girl he recognized from the village. She was a few years older than him, with kind brown eyes and dark hair tied back in a neat bun. She was Ayame, the daughter of the man who ran the ramen stand. In her hands, she held a covered bowl that was steaming gently, its savory aroma cutting through the damp air. Hi, she said, her voice a little hesitant. She seemed nervous. My father, he saw what happened in the alley. He told me to stay away, but, she trailed off, her gaze falling to the floor for a moment before meeting his again, full of a resolve that surprised him. You looked hungry, and you're our best customer. So, she thrust the bowl forward. It's miso ramen, your favorite. Naruto looked at her, and for the first time, he used the fledgling sense that the tablet had awakened in him. He looked past her nervous expression, past her simple cotton dress, and saw her ka. It was a soft, gentle light, a warm and steady glow of uncomplicated kindness. There was no fear in it, no hatred, no deception. It was the purest soul he had ever seen. He had no words. The part of him that would have grinned and shouted his thanks was buried too deep. Instead, he simply looked at her, his cerulean eyes, now holding a depth that no child should possess, conveying a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. He reached out and took the bowl. His small, dirt-smudged fingers brushed against hers. Ayame felt a strange sensation, a gentle warmth that spread from his touch up her arm, chasing away the chill of the rainy evening. It felt like standing in the first sunbeam after a long winter. She looked into his eyes and felt, for a moment, that she was being seen in a way no one had ever seen her before. Thank you, Naruto said. The words were quiet, barely a whisper, but they were heavy with meaning. Ayame just nodded, suddenly feeling shy. You should eat it before it gets cold. She gave him a small, quick smile and then turned and hurried back down the stairs, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Naruto closed the door and leaned against it, the warmth of the ceramic bowl seeping into his hands. He looked down at the ramen, the steam curling up to mist his face. It was just a bowl of noodles. But in that moment, it was the most real thing in the world. It was an anchor, a single point of warmth and light in a world that had, until today, been nothing but cold and shadow. He ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was the first meal that had ever truly tasted like hope. Far across the village, in the tower that loomed over it like a watchful grandparent, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of decades. The report from his Anbu captain lay on the desk before him, its contents both concise and utterly baffling. 4 assailants, 1 Chunin and 3 academy students. Found in an alleyway in District 4. All 4 are alive, Lord Hokage, but unresponsive. Med Nin are calling it acute catatonia. No physical injuries besides minor contusions, no traces of foreign chakra, no signs of genjutsu. They are empty. The only witness, the owner of the Ichiraku ramen stand, reports seeing a blinding golden light before the boy emerged from the alley, unharmed. Hiruzen picked up his crystal ball. Pouring a small amount of chakra into it, he focused his thoughts, his will, on Naruto. The image swirled into view. He saw the boy not cowering in his apartment, but sitting peacefully on his futon. The empty ramen bowl beside him, staring at a black stone tablet in his hands. The Hokage frowned. He had personally overseen the contents of that apartment. There was no stone tablet. He made a decision. With a flicker of movement, he was gone from his office, reappearing moments later on the rooftop overlooking Naruto's rundown apartment building. 2 of his best Anbu, one with a cat mask and the other with a weasel mask, materialized silently beside him. "I am going in alone," Hiruzen said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Stand guard. Do not interfere unless I signal." He moved with the silence of a falling leaf, entering the apartment through the window as easily as a breeze. Naruto did not seem startled. He simply looked up from the tablet, his blue eyes meeting Hiruzen's. The old Hokage felt a jolt. The boy's eyes, they were different. The childish defiance was gone, replaced by an unnerving, ancient calm. "Naruto," Hiruzen began, his voice gentle. "There was an incident today. Are you all right?" Naruto nodded slowly. "I am. Some shinobi were hurt," Hiruzen pressed, watching the boy's reaction carefully. "They are not hurt," Naruto replied, his voice flat and certain. "They are just quiet now." The simplicity and certainty of the statement sent a shiver down Hiruzen's spine. He took a step closer. "Naruto, where did you get that stone?" Naruto looked down at the hieroglyph-etched tablet. "It was a gift. From my mother." Hiruzen's breath caught in his throat. Kushina, how? He had cleared her effects himself. Had he missed something? He knelt down in front of the boy, his old knees protesting. "May I see it?" Naruto hesitated for a fraction of a second before extending the tablet. Hiruzen reached out to take it, but as a matter of instinct. He rested his other hand gently on Naruto's forehead, a grandfatherly gesture meant to be reassuring, and also a subtle way to scan for any disturbance. The moment his skin touched Naruto's, his world erupted. It was not a vision. It was an experience. He was standing under a blinding, benevolent sun in a desert of endless gold. He felt the heat on his ancient skin, smelled the dry, clean air. Saw the impossible geometry of the pyramids piercing a sky of perfect blue. He felt a sense of order, of peace, of power so immense and so fundamentally good that it defied comprehension. It was the feeling of a perfect equation, a flawless piece of music, a universe without chaos. And at the heart of it all, he felt a presence, the same presence he now felt radiating from the boy in front of him. A presence of kings and gods, of a lineage that predated the sage of 6 paths himself. He pulled his hand back as if burned, stumbling backward, his heart pounding in his chest. He was panting, his mind reeling. The vision was gone, but the feeling remained, a ghost of golden light behind his eyes. He looked at Naruto, who was watching him with those same, ancient, knowing eyes. The Kyuubi was a creature of immense, chaotic chakra. A natural disaster given sentient form. What he had just felt was its polar opposite. It was a power of immense, perfect order. A fundamental law of the universe given a human soul. He now understood. The seal Minato had used, it wasn't just a cage. It was a crucible. The violent, chaotic energy of the Kyuubi, slammed against the ancient, dormant bloodline slumbering in Kushina's lineage, with Minato's own brilliant chakra as the catalyst. It hadn't just created a Jinchuriki. It had forged something new. It had awakened something old. Hiruzen slowly got to his feet. His mind racing, the political and strategic implications crashing down on him like a tidal wave. This boy, he was not a weapon. He was not a deterrent. He was a miracle and a catastrophe waiting to happen. He was the greatest secret in Konoha, a secret that, if revealed, would either save the world or tear it apart. He looked out the window. The long, miserable rain had finally broken. On the eastern horizon, the first sliver of the sun was rising, painting the bruised clouds in hues of orange, pink, and brilliant gold. A new day was dawning. And Hiruzen Sarutobi, the god of shinobi, felt a tremor of something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt fear. And he felt hope. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Grammar of Creation. The decision that altered the course of Naruto Uzumaki's life was made not in a moment of crisis, but in the sterile quiet of the Hokage's council chambers. The air in the windowless room was thick with the scent of old wood, ink, and the unspoken weight of history. 3 figures sat at a polished table under the austere gaze of the portraits of the previous Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face a mask of weary contemplation, and his 2 former teammates. Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane, their expressions etched with the severe pragmatism of those who had seen 2 shinobi world wars. A 4th figure stood in the shadows, and whose presence was a void in the room's energy. Danzo Shimura, his right eye bandaged, his visible left eye a chip of obsidian gleaming with cold ambition. The boy is a threat, Kaharu stated, her voice as brittle as ancient parchment. The incident in the alley proves his instability. 4 Konoha shinobi, rendered little more than breathing corpses. This power, whatever its source, is untamed. It is not a threat. Danzo's voice was a low rasp from the corner, devoid of emotion. It is an asset, an unparalleled one. He did not kill them. He unmade them. Such a weapon, properly conditioned and controlled, could end wars before they begin. Give him to me. Root's methods will ensure his loyalty. We will forge him into the perfect shield for Konoha. Hiruzen's gaze remained fixed on the interlocking grain of the wooden table. He had replayed the vision from Naruto's mind 1,000 times. The golden sun, the white pyramids, the feeling of absolute, perfect order. That was not a power to be conditioned. You could not teach a hurricane to be loyal. You could not forge a fundamental law of the universe. No, Hiruzen said, the word soft but imbued with the unshakable finality of a mountain. You will not touch him. Danzo. His power is not a weapon to be wielded. It is a legacy to be understood. To treat it as a tool would be a catastrophic folly. Sentimentality, Hiruzen. Homura scoffed, his fingers steepled. The Jinchuriki has always been our ultimate deterrent. This abnormality only increases his value. He must be trained as a shinobi, integrated into our military structure. He will not be integrated. Hiruzen countered, finally looking up. His eyes, usually warm and grandfatherly, now held the cold fire of the god of shinobi. He cannot be. To place him in the academy, to teach him the standard curriculum, would be like trying to teach a hawk to swim. It is pointless and cruel. He will not be trained. He will be educated. This gave them pause. The distinction was subtle but immense. Training was for soldiers. Education was for scholars, for leaders. He will be removed from the general populace, Hiruzen continued, laying out his decree. He will be given a private tutor. A specialist who can cultivate his intellect, not just his abilities. His development will be monitored directly by me. He is not to be contacted, approached, or interfered with by any department, including Root. Without my explicit authorization, he is no longer simply Konoha's Jinchuriki. He is a protected cultural and strategic resource of the highest order. This is my decision as Hokage. It is not open for debate. The silence that followed was heavy with dissent, but none dared to challenge a direct order delivered with such conviction. Danzo's visible eye narrowed almost imperceptibly, a silent promise of future conflict, before he melted back into the shadows and was gone. Kaharu and Homura exchanged a look of deep disapproval, but they held their tongues. The meeting was over. Hiruzen was left alone in the quiet room, the weight of his decision settling upon him. He had just isolated Naruto even further, painting an even larger target on his back. But it was the only way. He had to give the boy a chance to understand what he was before the world decided for him. Now, he only had to find a teacher willing to take on a student who was potentially more powerful than a god. There was only one name on his list. Saijin Nakamura lived in a small, meticulously kept house on the very edge of the village, where the manicured streets began to fray into the untamed wilderness of the forest. The house was old, built in a pre-village style with dark wood and rice paper screens, and it was surrounded by a garden that was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Saijin himself was much like his home, old, quiet, and perfectly ordered. He had once been Konoha's foremost cryptographer, the man whose intellect had deciphered the encrypted communications of Iwa. Gaara brought the Second Shinobi World War to a close. But for the last 20 years, he had been retired, living a life of scholarly seclusion, his only companions his books and his Go board. He was sitting on his veranda, contemplating a move in a game he was playing against himself, when Hiruzen arrived. Saijin did not look up. "It has been a long time, Hiruzen," he said, his voice a dry, precise murmur. He placed a black stone on the board with a soft click. "You only visit me when you have a problem that cannot be solved with a Rasengan or a treaty. I have a student for you," Hiruzen said, getting straight to the point. Saijin's hand paused over the bowl of white stones. "I am retired. I do not teach. This is not a normal student," Hiruzen continued, sitting opposite the old man. "He is a puzzle, a living cipher. His potential is beyond anything I have ever seen, but his mind is the key, not his fists. He needs a teacher who values intellect over jutsu, understanding over power. He needs you, my old friend." Saijin finally looked up. His eyes, set in a web of fine wrinkles, were as sharp and clear as polished glass. "You are speaking of the Jinchuriki. The Uzumaki boy." It was not a question. Saijin missed very little, even in his seclusion. "I have heard the whispers. The incident in the alley. An S-ranked secret within hours. You are trying to contain something you don't understand." "I am trying to nurture something I don't understand," Hiruzen corrected gently. "And I need your help." Saijin was silent for a long time, his gaze distant. He had spent his life breaking things down, codes, languages, strategies. The thought of building something up, of shaping a mind of such unprecedented potential, it was a challenge that stirred something in him, a flick of the old intellectual fire he thought had long since died. "Bring him to me tomorrow," Saijin said at last, turning his attention back to the Go board. "If his mind is as interesting as you claim, I will consider it. If not, you will leave me to my game. Now, this move is giving me trouble." The first meeting between Naruto and Saijin took place in the older man's library. The room was Naruto's vision of paradise. Floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with scrolls and leather-bound books, the air smelling of old paper, ink, and dried herbs. There were no weapons on the walls, only maps of Forg, autumn lands and complex diagrams of astrological charts. Saijin sat behind a low desk, observing Naruto as the boy entered. Naruto, in turn, observed him back. He saw the man's his soul light. It was not a brilliant blaze like the Hokage's, nor a gentle warmth like Ayame's. It was a cool, intricate, silver light, like a spiderweb woven from moonlight, a pattern of breathtaking complexity and logic. This was the soul of a thinker, a builder of systems. For 10 minutes, neither spoke a word. Saijin simply watched. Naruto did not fidget. He did not look around with wide-eyed wonder. He stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but alert, his gaze taking in everything, processing, cataloging. Finally, Saijin pushed a single, basic scroll across the desk. "This is the foundational text on chakra suppression seals," Saijin said. His voice crisp. "Read it. Tell me what you see." Naruto picked up the scroll. He unrolled it, his eyes scanning the intricate lines of ink. But he wasn't just reading the words. His newly awakened senses, the cause sight, allowed him to perceive something more. He could see the faint, lingering intent of the long-dead master who had first brushed the characters. He saw the flow of the concept, the way the principles interconnected. He saw the seal not as a static drawing, but as a dynamic, living equation. And he saw a flaw. "Here," Naruto said, his small L finger pointing to a specific nexus of lines. "The radial for flow dampening. It's inefficient. It creates a harmonic resonance that bleeds approximately 3.7% of the contained chakra. If you were to invert the polarity of the third and fifth runes and recalibrate the primary conduit, you could achieve perfect containment with 15% less chakra expenditure for the user." Saijin froze, his hand halfway to a cup of tea. He slowly leaned forward, peering at the section Naruto indicated. He traced the lines with his finger, his own brilliant mind running the calculations. Inverting the polarity, calibrating the conduit. It was an elegant, impossibly simple solution to a problem that Fuinjutsu masters had debated for centuries. A problem no one had ever solved. The old cryptographer leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just found a puzzle worthy of his intellect. "All right, boy," Saijin said, a new light in his eyes. "Let's begin." The next 5 years were a period of intense, isolated growth. Naruto's life became a quiet routine of study and practice under Saijin's meticulous guidance. He devoured the library, his progress astonishing. He did not learn Fuinjutsu. He absorbed it, assimilated it into his very being. He could glance at a storage scroll and tell its carrying capacity and the decay rate of its preservation seal. He look at the complex security seals on the Hokage's vault and describe, in precise detail, how to dismantle them in 17 different ways. Saijin quickly realized he was not teaching the boy a subject, but merely providing him with the language to describe the knowledge he already possessed. In secret, in the soundproofed confines of his own room, Naruto practiced the true grammar of his power, the hieroglyphic magic of Kemet. He learned to write the symbol for stillness in the air with a finger of golden light, causing a cup of water to become as solid as glass. He etched the glyph for warmth onto a small stone, creating a personal heater that never ran out of energy. He learned to write the symbol for silence on his door, and the apartment became a sanctuary of absolute peace. It was an art of quiet, subtle creation, of enforcing his will upon the fabric of reality in small, precise ways. He told no one of this, not even Saijin. It felt too sacred, too personal. It was the language of his soul, and he would not share it until he fully understood it himself. His physical training was just as unorthodox. Saijin, recognizing that the boy's body was as unique as his mind, did not teach him any of Konoha's standard taijutsu forms. Instead, he encouraged Naruto to develop his own. Naruto, guided by the principles of his bloodline, light, speed, and precision, created a style he called the Way of the Sunbeam. It was less a martial art and more a form of applied physics. It involved using micro-bursts of light from the soles of his feet for instantaneous, silent movement, allowing him to cover distances in the blink of an eye. His strikes were not powerful punches or kicks, but open palm taps or single-finger jabs with his fingertips wreathed in solidified light. Designed not to break bones but to strike nerve clusters and disrupt chakra flow with surgical precision. It was a fighting style devoid of wasted motion, of anger, of anything but pure, inhuman efficiency. He saw his peers only rarely, fleeting glimpses of them in the village. He saw the Uchiha boy, Sasuke, walking with an air of cold arrogance, trailed by fawning admirers. He saw the Hyuga prodigy, Neji, his eyes filled with a quiet, caged fury. He saw them all, living the life of a normal shinobi in training, and he felt a profound, unbridgeable distance from them. His only consistent connection to the outside world was a yame. Once a week, every week, he would visit Ichiraku ramen late at night. He and Ayame would barely speak. He would simply sit, and she would make him his ramen, and in that shared, comfortable silence, he would recharge his humanity. Her warm, uncomplicated soul was a balm to his own, which was growing more ancient and complex by the day. The first true test of his development came on the day Saijin declared him ready for a joint training exercise. It was a special event, held for the top prospects of the graduating academy class. It was a chance for the Jonin instructors and the Hokage to assess the next generation of talent. Saijin's request for Naruto's inclusion had been met with resistance, but the Hokage had approved it. Naruto stood on the edge of Training Ground 7, a silent, orange-clad figure among a crowd of chattering 11-year-olds. He was the same age, but he felt like a different species. He recognized Tenten, a girl with her dark hair in 2 neat buns, her gear polished to a mirror shine. She was known as the Academy's top weapons specialist, a prodigy of trajectory and force. The instructor, a grizzled chunin, called for a series of one-on-one sparring matches. Sasuke Uchiha, with effortless grace, defeated Kiba Inuzuka. Shino Aburame, with quiet efficiency, trapped a panicking Ino Yamanaka. Then, the instructor called out, Tenten Higurashi vs. Naruto Uzumaki. Quote, a murmur went through the students. Most of them only knew Naruto as the strange, reclusive boy who was never in class. Tenten looked him over, a critical frown on her face. He had no weapon holsters, no visible scrolls, no gear of any kind. Are you even a ninja? She asked, her tone a mix of genuine curiosity and professional disdain. Where are your tools? I have them, Naruto replied, his voice calm and even. The match began. Tenten did not hesitate. With a fluid, practiced motion, she unsealed a scroll and unleashed her signature attack, the twin rising dragons. A whirlwind of kunai, shuriken, senbon, and daggers filled the air, a storm of steel that converged on Naruto from all angles. It was a beautiful, deadly display of perfect aim and overwhelming force. The other students gasped. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly. No academy student could survive that. Naruto did not move. He simply raised one hand, palm outward. A perfect circle of shimmering golden light materialized in front of him, 3 feet in diameter. It was not a chakra shield. It looked solid, like a pane of stained glass depicting a miniature sun. The storm of steel crashed against it. There was no clang of metal on metal, no explosion of force. Each weapon that touched the shield simply stopped. Its kinetic energy was absorbed, its trajectory halted. When the last shuriken had been caught, they all hung there for a second, suspended against the golden light, before dropping to the ground in a harmless clatter. The field was silent. Tenten stared, her mouth slightly agape. It was impossible. Before she could recover, Naruto lowered the shield. In his other hand, a new object had formed. It was a spear, approximately 6 feet long, made of the same solidified, golden light. It was a work of art. The shaft was perfectly straight, the leaf-shaped spearhead was flawlessly symmetrical, and the entire weapon gave off a faint, warm glow. It looked utterly weightless. He did not throw it. He did not charge. He simply took one step, a silent, instantaneous movement that made it seem like he had teleported, and appeared directly in front of her. The tip of the light spear was resting gently against the hollow of her throat. It was not cold, like steel, but warm, like a sunbeam. Yet, she had no doubt it could pierce her soul. I yield, she whispered, her mind unable to process the speed. The power, the sheer, impossible craftsmanship of the weapon at her throat. Naruto took a step back, and the spear dissolved into motes of harmless, glittering light. The instructor, his face pale, declared Naruto the winner. The other students stared at him not with admiration, but with a mixture of fear and awe. He was not one of them. Later, after the exercise was over, Tenten approached him. Her earlier disdain was gone, replaced by an intense, almost frantic curiosity. How? She demanded, her eyes wide. The shield, it had no impact shock. The spear, its balance was perfect, but it had no mass. How did you make them? What material is it? How do you forge light? Can you control its density? What's the tensile strength? The questions came out in a rapid-fire burst. The obsessive queries of a master artisan who has just witnessed a new, divine medium. Naruto simply looked at her soul light, which burned with the bright, focused fire of a forge, a passion for creation. He saw a kindred spirit, in a way. It is not forged, he said quietly. It is willed into being. Her brow furrowed in confusion and frustration, but her obsession was now irrevocably kindled. She would spend years trying to replicate the properties of his light, a quest that would push her own skills to legendary heights. The second test of his new life came a few months later. An unforeseen event that showcased a different facet of his power. Hiruzen summoned him to the Inuzuka clan compound, a sprawling complex that smelled of pine trees, wet earth, and clean animal fur. In the clan's main veterinary clinic, a grim-faced Hana Inuzuka stood over a large, black Ninken, one of the clan's alpha breeders, who lay whimpering on a cot. Hana, a Jonin renowned for her skill as both a combatant and a healer, looked exhausted. Lord Hokage, I've tried everything, she said, her voice tight with frustration. His vitals are stable, there's no poison, no physical injury, no chakra blockage. But he's fading. It's like his spirit is unraveling. Hiruzen turned to Naruto. Naruto, I would like you to take a look. Hana looked at the small, silent boy with skepticism. What could a child do that she, a master vet nin, could not? But she held her tongue at the Hokage's request. Naruto knelt beside the whimpering dog. He closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. He saw the Ninken's Ka, a normally bright and loyal flame of animal spirit, but it was sputtering, choked by a dark, thorny vine of energy. It was pure, distilled fear, a spiritual wound, likely from a traumatic battle long ago, that had festered in the dog's soul. Medical ninjutsu healed the body. This was an ailment of the spirit. He placed his hand gently on the Ninken's head. He did not channel chakra. He channeled his own essence, the pure, ordering light of his bloodline. A soft, golden warmth flowed from his palm, not into the dog's body, but into its soul. He didn't attack the thorny vine of fear. He simply illuminated it. He bathed it in a light of pure, unconditional peace, a light that contained the concept of safety and calm. Under the gentle pressure of this absolute order, the chaotic knot of fear could not sustain its existence. It slowly, gently, dissolved, like a shadow in the morning sun. The great dog's whimpering ceased. Its breathing deepened. It let out a contented sigh and licked Naruto's hand before settling into a deep, healing sleep. Hana stared, her professional jaw having dropped. She had felt the energy coming from the boy. It was not ninjutsu. It was life. It was the energy of a healthy forest, of a new dawn, of a mother nursing her pups. It was a power that resonated with the deepest, most primal instincts of her clan. She looked at Naruto, this strange, silent boy, and saw not a Jinchuriki, not a weapon, but a shepherd of souls. A profound respect, bordering on reverence, took root in her heart. The day of the Genin examinations arrived under a high, pale sun. The final test was different this year, a special trial designed by Hiruzen with only one student in mind. The graduates were taken to Training Ground 44, the infamous Forest of Death. But they were not to fight each other. Enko Mitarashi, the proctor, grinned menacingly. The rules are simple, maggots. You will be placed in the forest alone. 3 squads of Anbu Black Ops will be hunting you. Your goal is to survive for 1 hour. Not get caught, not be seen, just survive. Begin. The students scattered, a frantic explosion of panicked energy. They scrambled for cover, set traps, and prepared for the longest hour of their lives. All except Naruto. He did not run. He did not hide. He walked with a calm, deliberate pace to the very center of the training ground, a small, open clearing. The Anbu squad leaders, watching from the treetops, exchanged confused glances. What was he doing? It was tactical suicide. Naruto knelt. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his focus. Then, using his index finger as a stylus, he began to draw in the soft dirt. He moved with a fluid, mesmerizing grace, his finger tracing a massive, complex circle. Within the circle, he inscribed a series of intricate, flowing symbols, the hieroglyphs of his ancestors. They were words of power, concepts given form: peace, stillness, consecration, exclusion, haven. He was not just drawing in the dirt. He was writing a command, issuing a decree to reality itself. The Anbu captain, a man with a cat mask, focused his senses. He felt no buildup of chakra, no indication of a jutsu. The boy was just doodling. Move in, he ordered through the squad's private comm. Take him. Just as the Anbu were about to launch their attack, Naruto finished. He placed his palm Florida T in the center of the circle he had drawn. Sanctuary, he whispered, the word a soft breath of command. A silent wave of golden light pulsed from the circle. It did not explode. It grew, expanding upward and outward to form a perfect, shimmering dome of light that covered 10 acres of the forest, with Naruto at its exact center. The dome was translucent, and through it, the Anbu could see Naruto sit down, cross-legged, and begin to meditate. The captain landed silently at the edge of the dome, his 2 teammates beside him. He reached out a gloved hand and touched the luminous wall. It was perfectly smooth, warm, and utterly, completely impassable. He tried to phase through it with a teleportation jutsu. He was rebuffed, his technique fizzling against a wall that did not seem to be made of chakra. One of his subordinates tried a high-level fire jutsu. The flames washed over the dome, not even blackening its surface. They threw their combined weight against it. It was like pushing against a mountain. The Anbu captain stared at the boy meditating peacefully within the golden sphere, completely safe, completely untouchable. The objective was to survive for an hour. The boy had simply created a space where the very concept of threat could not exist. He had not hidden from the test, nor had he fought back. He had passed by making the test itself irrelevant. The captain raised a hand to his throat communicator, his mind struggling to formulate a report. He was a veteran of 100s rank missions, a master of infiltration and assassination, one of the deadliest shinobi in the world. And he was looking at a problem that none of his skills, none of his training, none of his experience had prepared him for. "Sir," he finally said, his voice a strained whisper. "We have a situation. Target Uzumaki has redefined the parameters of the examination." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. An oasis of screaming sand. The missive from Sunagaker had arrived on a day when the air in Konoha was thick and humid, heavy with the promise of a summer thunderstorm. It was written on crisp, sand-colored parchment, its calligraphy elegant and precise, and its contents were a political masterstroke. Suna, in a gesture of renewed faith and post-conflict collaboration following the disastrous Konoha crush, an event Naruto had decisively ended, was proposing a new, joint Shunin examination. It would not be held in Konoha, nor in Suna, but in a neutral territory between their nations, a vast, ancient ruin known only as the Crucible. It was an offer of an olive branch, a public declaration that the two great villages were moving towards a future of cooperation. In his office, Hiruzen Sarutobi had read the scroll 3 times. He saw the political brilliance, but he also saw the unwritten challenge between the lines. It was a test. Suna was watching Konoha, watching how it would handle its most powerful, most enigmatic asset. The world had heard whispers of the boy who had ended the invasion with a wave of his hand. The genin who commanded a power beyond classification. How Konoha presented him on the international stage would define the next decade of geopolitics. He had summoned Naruto that afternoon. The storm had finally broken, and rain lashed against the windows of the Hokage's office. Naruto stood before his desk, no longer the small, bewildered child from the alleyway, but a composed young man of 12. His orange jumpsuit seemed less a beacon of scorn and more a deliberate, ironic statement against the shadows he now commanded. "Suna has invited us to a Chunin exam," Hiruzen said, sliding the scroll across the desk. "I have accepted." Naruto's gaze swept over the document. He didn't just read the words, his cause sight picked up the subtle intent woven into them. Why the writer? The careful mixture of genuine hope for peace and the sharp, tactical cunning of a shinobi leader. "They want to see me," Naruto stated. It wasn't a question. "They do," Hiruzen confirmed, leaning back and lighting his pipe. The sweet scent of the tobacco filling the room. "As does Iwa, and Kumo, and every other village that has an ear to the ground. You are an anomaly, Naruto. A king on a chessboard full of pawns. They don't know if you are a threat or a savior. So, we will show them." He paused, letting the smoke curl towards the ceiling. "The other teams from your graduating CL.S will be sent as a standard delegation. Team 8, Team 10, Team Guy. But you will be different. You will be registered as Team 11. A team of 1. The implication was immense. In the world of shinobi, where the 3-man cell was the sacred, fundamental unit, sending a single genin was either an act of supreme arrogance or supreme confidence. It was a nonviolent demonstration of power, a statement that said, "This one boy is the equal of any of your teams. Your objective is not to win," Hiruzen continued, his voice low and serious. "It is to be seen. Let them watch you. Let them measure your power and find it immeasurable. Let them see your character and find it unshakable. Be a mystery they cannot solve. Do you understand your mission?" Naruto looked from the scroll to the old Hokage, whose soul light was a complex, weary blend of love, fear, and profound responsibility. He understood perfectly. His role was not to be a ninja. It was to be a symbol. "I understand, Lord Hokage," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. The journey to the land of wind was a lesson in brutal transitions. The lush, vibrant greens of the land of fire, with its sprawling forests and humid air, slowly gave way to a harsher, more primal landscape. The trees grew sparse, replaced by hardy, sun-bleached scrub. The rich soil thinned, revealing the bones of the earth beneath. great mesas of red rock and cracked, sun-baked clay. The air itself changed, losing its moisture, becoming thin, dry, and filled with the taste of dust. Naruto traveled alone, moving with the silent, ground-eating lope he had perfected. He felt the sun on his skin not as an oppressive force, but as a welcome touch, a source of ambient energy that resonated with the power humming in his veins. He watched as the sky above transformed from a familiar, soft blue to a vast, unforgiving dome of brilliant, metallic azure. This was a land stripped bare of all pleasantries, a place of stark and terrible beauty. He felt strangely at home. The crucible was located in a deep, wind-scoured depression in the heart of the desert, a place where the temperature could boil water at noon and freeze it at midnight. When Naruto arrived at the designated rendezvous point on a high cliff overlooking the site, the sheer scale of it stole his breath. Below him lay the sunken ruins of a city so ancient it made Konoha look like it was built yesterday. Massive, crumbling structures of black obsidian and weathered sandstone jutted from the dunes like the ribs of a colossal skeleton. A single, needle-like tower of polished black rock stood at the very center. Impossibly intact, the air shimmered with a palpable heat, and a constant, low moan of wind whispered through the dead streets, giving the place an eerie, mournful life. Teams from all the great villages were gathered, their colorful attire a stark contrast to the monochrome landscape. He saw the nervous energy of the Konoha teams, Kiba already boasting, Ino and Sakura already bickering. He saw the stoic, granite-faced genin from Iwa, the arrogant, swaggering youths from Kumo, and the quiet, unnerving teams from Kiri. And then he saw them. The Sand siblings. Konkuro, with his purple face paint and the large, cloth-wrapped bundle on his back, radiated a nervous, theatrical aggression. His sister, Temari, stood with her arms crossed, her giant fan strapped to her back. Her teal eyes sweeping across the assembled competition with a look of bored, clinical assessment. Her soul light was a sharp, focused, emerald green, the color of a cunning strategist, laced with a fierce, protective loyalty. And then there was Gaara. He stood slightly apart from his siblings, his arms also crossed, his face a mask of terrifying calm. But his soul was anything but calm. To Naruto's cause sight, Gaara was not a boy. He was a gaping wound in the fabric of reality. His soul was a screaming vortex of furious red and abyssal black, shot through with the terrified, shrieking gold of the Biju trapped within him. It was a maelstrom of self-hatred, fear, and murderous rage so potent that it physically distorted the spiritual energy around him. The air near Gaara felt cold, and the sand at his feet seemed to shift and crawl with a life of its own. Naruto felt a strange pang, not of fear, but of pity. The noise inside that boy's head must be deafening. A Suna proctor, a tall man with scars crisscrossing his face, stepped forward. "Welcome to the Crucible. For the first stage of this examination, your combat skills are useless. This is a test of intelligence, diplomacy, and information warfare." He explained the rules. Each three-man team would be given 1/3 of a riddle. The full riddle, when solved, would reveal the location of a hidden entrance to the central tower. To acquire the other pieces, they would have to find other teams and negotiate, trade, or, if they chose, fight for them. When Naruto registered as a one-man team, the proctor gave him a single, complete scroll. "The Hokage's confidence in you is either inspiring or insane," the proctor murmured, handing it over. "Your test is different. This scroll contains a ciphered message. Decipher it, and you will have your location. Good luck." As the signal was given, the teams exploded into the ruins, a flurry of activity that was quickly swallowed by the sheer vastness of the dead city. Naruto, however, simply found a patch of shade at the base of a crumbling wall and unrolled his scroll. The characters were an elegant, complex Suna code. To any other genin, it would be an impossible task. To Naruto, who could see the intent behind the ink, it was an open book. But he wasn't going to solve it yet. That was not the mission. The mission was to be observed. He sat, closed his eyes, and began to expand his senses. In a cool, dark command center carved into the cliff face high above the crucible, Temari stood beside her sensei, Baki. The room was filled with dozens of monitors, displaying a feed from magically enhanced surveillance cameras scattered throughout the ruins. It was her job to monitor the progress of the exam, to analyze the tactics of the other villages, and to keep a close wary eye on her younger brother. Gaara is on the move, Baki said, his voice a low grumble. He's not searching. He's hunting. Temari's jaw tightened. He's a liability. His instability makes him a poor tool for diplomacy. She watched as Gaara's dot on the main tactical map moved with predatory purpose towards a cluster of 3 dots marked as Team Sugar from a Megakar. He's going to make a mess. Her eyes scanned the other monitors. She saw the Konoha team struggling to adapt. The Yamanaka girl's mind jutsu was disorienting in the vast, open spaces. The Inuzuka boy's nose was overwhelmed by the swirling, ancient sense. The Uchiha was faring better, his Sharingan allowing him to track and analyze, but he was still just one piece of a flustered team. Then her eyes fell on a monitor displaying a lone, orange-clad figure sitting peacefully in the shade. The Konoha Jinchuriki, Naruto Uzumaki. What is he doing? Temari wondered aloud. He's been sitting there for 20 minutes. Is he meditating? Perhaps he can't crack the cipher, Baki suggested. He's a one-man team. He has no one to help him. Temari wasn't so sure. There was a stillness about the boy, an unnerving calm that stood in stark contrast to the frantic activity of everyone else. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't even trying. It felt wrong. She zoomed in the camera, the image of his placid face filling the screen. It was strangely irritating. While everyone else fought and schemed for their survival, he was simply waiting. Her attention was snapped back to the main map as an alert flashed. Gaara's dot had intercepted the AIM team. She switched to the corresponding visual feed just in time to see the massacre begin. It was brutal. Gaara's sand moved like a sentient beast, trapping one of the AIM nin. A boy with an array of umbrellas. Sand coffin. Gaara's voice was a dead, chilling whisper, perfectly audible through the high-fidelity microphone. The sand constricted. Temari winced, as the sound of crunching bone and a wet, muffled scream reached her ears. The sand, now stained dark red, fell away, leaving a mangled corpse. The other 2 AIM nin were frozen in terror. Gaara turned his dead eyes on them, a faint, terrible smile gracing his lips. This is it, Baki sighed. Another international incident. But then, something impossible happened. On the screen, a figure shimmered into existence between Gaara and his terrified prey. It was the Uzumaki boy. He hadn't run there. He had simply appeared. He wasn't even in that sector, Temari breathed, her eyes wide. How did he move that fast? On the screen, Gaara glared at the newcomer. Get out of my way. They are my prey. They will prove my existence. A tidal wave of sand, far larger and faster than the one that had killed the first boy, erupted from the ground, rushing towards Naruto. Temari braced herself for the inevitable, gruesome conclusion. This boy, whatever his reputation, was about to be erased. The wave hit, and nothing happened. The sand, a churning, murderous torrent a moment before, simply stopped. It fell to the ground about a foot away from Naruto's body, becoming inert, lifeless dust. It didn't hit a barrier. It didn't get blocked. It was as if the very will that animated it, the very hatred that gave it purpose, had been nullified in an instant. Naruto stood perfectly still, his hands in his pockets. His expression unreadable. Your soul is loud, he said, his voice carrying clearly to the command center. It was not an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. All that screaming. It must be tiring. Gaara's eyes widened, his composure cracking for the first time. What did you do? He snarled, thrusting his hands forward. The sand at his feet rose again, forming a dozen sharp spikes that shot towards Naruto. Again, the same result. The spikes crumbled into dust just before reaching their target, defeated not by a jutsu, but by the boy's mere presence. A faint, almost invisible shimmer of golden heat haze surrounded Naruto's body. It was the only sign of the immense power at play. Temari stared, her strategist's mind refusing to compute what she was seeing. This wasn't a ninjutsu battle. The Uzumaki boy hadn't used a single hand seal. He hadn't molded any visible chakra. He was neutralizing Gaara's absolute defense and unstoppable offense by simply standing there. It was like watching someone try to stab a sunbeam. Why do you kill? Naruto asked, his tone genuinely curious. To feel alive, Gaara shrieked, his face contorting in a mask of rage and pain. When they fear me, when they die by my hand, It is the only way I know I exist. It is my purpose. It is my proof. Proof is not something you take from others, Naruto replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. It is something you build inside yourself. What you're feeling isn't life. It's just noise. You are drowning in the noise of another's pain so you can't hear your own. You are not a monster. You are just a lonely, frightened boy who is making everyone else as miserable as he is. Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, striking not at Gaara's body, but at the cracked and terrified foundations of his entire philosophy. Gaara recoiled as if physically struck, clutching his head. Shukaku, the demon within, roared in fury, but its rage felt impotent against the boy's placid certainty. Naruto looked at the two terrified nin, who were scrambling away. Then he looked back at the tormented Gaara. He gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. Get some rest. The noise will be quieter if you do. He turned and walked away. His orange jumpsuit a defiant slash of color against the pale sand. He dissolved into a shimmer of heat and was gone, leaving Gaara alone, trembling, surrounded by a mountain of sand that would no longer obey his murderous commands. In the command center, Temari leaned back, her knuckles white where she gripped the console. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's air conditioning. The reports hadn't done him justice. This boy wasn't a Jinchuriki in the way Gaara was. He wasn't a weapon. He was something else entirely. A force of nature, an ideological counterpoint, and for the first time in her life, looking at her broken, confused brother on the screen, she felt a flicker of something she had never thought possible for him: hope. The preliminary matches were held in a hastily constructed arena at the base of the central tower. Naruto had easily found the entrance, the cipher on his scroll having been a simple substitution code. It took him less than 5 minutes to solve once he decided to focus on it. He had spent the rest of the hour observing the other teams, a silent ghost in the ruins. Now, his name had been called. Naruto Uzumaki versus Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba grinned, cracking his knuckles. Akamaru, his canine partner, barked from atop his head. All right, we drew the weirdo. This'll be over in a second. We'll show you what a real Konoha ninja can do. Naruto walked calmly onto the arena floor, his expression placid. Begin. The proctor shouted. Kiba didn't waste a moment. Man-beast clone. Fang over fang. He and a transformed Akamaru became two identical, spinning drills of claws and fangs, tearing across the arena floor towards Naruto in a pincer attack, leaving twin gouges in the hard-packed earth. The attack was ferocious, wild, and almost impossible to dodge. Naruto didn't dodge. He watched the two spinning blurs approach. He saw the boisterous, aggressive, but ultimately not malicious soul lights of both boy and dog. As they came within inches of him, he moved. It was a single, fluid motion. He sidestepped Kiba's trajectory, his hand shooting out. He did not punch. He did not block. He gently placked his open palm flat on Kiba's forehead as the Inuzuka boy shot past him. A single, brilliant, harmless flash of golden light pulsed from his palm. Kiba's eyes went wide. The ferocious snarl on his face went slack. The aggressive, wild energy that fueled his jutsu vanished. His spin faltered, and he tumbled to the ground in a heap, skidding to a halt. Akamaru, similarly, stopped spinning and landed with a confused yip. Kiba lay on the ground, his eyes open and staring at the sky, a look of profound, peaceful confusion on his face. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki, the proctor announced, looking just as confused as everyone else. A medic nin rushed over, checking Kiba. He's fine, she reported, her voice filled with disbelief. No injuries. His chakra levels are normal. He's just, I don't know how to describe it. His fighting spirit is gone. He's completely docile. The stadium was silent. The genin stared, trying to understand what they had just seen. A one-touch knockout that left the opponent completely unharmed but unwilling to fight. It was a technique that defied all known principles of combat. High above, in the cage booth, a figure disguised as the fourth cage watched the display with an unblinking, reptilian gaze. The other leaders saw a bizarre but effective technique. Orochimaru saw something more. He saw a power that did not destroy. It rewrote. It imposed its own reality on another being. The Sharingan could copy and predict. This power could command a long, Pale tongue flickered out, licking at dry lips. The hunger that had been stirring within him since he Saint laid eyes on the boy now coalesced into a singular, all-consuming obsession. Sasuke Uchiha and his developing eyes were a fine prize, a worthy vessel. But this boy was not a vessel. He was a throne. He was a gateway to divinity itself. The whispered name of his ultimate goal, immortality, suddenly felt small and pathetic. What was living forever compared to the power to command life itself? Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Serpent's Heresy, the Sun's Decree. The air in the arena, already thick with tension from the explosive start of the match between Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Desert, suddenly grew heavy. Pressing down with the weight of a coming execution. Gaara, his mind a fractured mirror from his encounter with Naruto, was losing control. The sand, once an extension of his will, now writhed around him with a desperate, hungry life of its own, the monstrous visage of the one-tailed Shukaku beginning to form around his tormented body. Sasuke, his Sharingan spinning, prepared for a battle against a force of nature. The crowd roared, oblivious, thinking this was merely the peak of the day's entertainment. High in the cage booth, the man wearing the robes of the fourth cage watched with cold, reptilian patience. His plan had been disrupted, his Jinchuriki tool mentally broken by the Uzumaki boy, but the timetable remained. He made a subtle, almost imperceptible, hand sign beneath his voluminous sleeve. It was the signal. Across the stadium, Kabuto Yakushi, disguised as an Anbu medic, raised his own hand. A wave of chakra pulsed from him, and a shower of tiny white feathers began to drift down from the sky, beautiful and deceptively serene. For the vast majority of the stadium's occupants, civilian and shinobi alike, the feathers brought a wave of irresistible drowsiness. Their roars of excitement died in their throats, replaced by soft sighs as they slumped into a deep, unnatural sleep. The Genjutsu, Temple of Nirvana. It was the trigger, the first note in a symphony of destruction. Giant snakes, summoned from tattooed scrolls, erupted from the ground in the outer districts, their hissing a prelude to the screams that would follow. Sound and Sand shinobi, who had infiltrated the village for weeks, threw off their disguises and began their slaughter. The invasion of Konoha had begun. But in the arena, the primary objective was unfolding with terrifying precision. 4 figures dropped from the roof of the cage booth, landing silently around Naruto Uzumaki. They were the Sound 4, Orochimaru's elite personal guard, their bodies warped by the corrupting power of his cursed seals. They moved with a speed and coordination that belied their grotesque appearances. Jirobo slammed his palms on the ground. Earth-style, Earth Dome prison. A hemisphere of rock erupted from the arena floor, sealing Naruto inside a tomb of stone. Saken, Uken, Chiyuya, and Kitamaru stood at the 4 cardinal points of the dome, their hands pressed against it. Ninja art. 4 violet flames formation. A shimmering, purple wall of chakra ignited around the stone dome, a barrier designed to contain a biju, to incinerate anything that touched it. It happened so fast that even the Jonin in the stands were caught off guard. Kakashi's visible eye widened in shock. Guy's boisterous grin vanished. They had expected an attack on the Hokage, the standard procedure for any invasion. But the enemy's most powerful trap, their most elite squad, had been used on a genin. From the cage booth, Orochimaru's disguised voice, amplified by jutsu, echoed across the now silent stadium. It was filled with a triumphant, sibilant hiss. Lord Third, do you see? You thought the Uchiha was the prize. A fine appetizer, to be sure. But tonight, I feast on a god. Hiruzen Sarutobi, his face grim, finally understood the horrifying truth. The invasion wasn't for Konoha. It was for Naruto. He and his entire village had walked into a trap designed to capture the one being who could have saved them. Inside the rock dome, in the absolute darkness, Naruto stood perfectly still. He felt the vibrations of the barrier igniting outside. He felt the malevolent, twisted soul lights of the 4 shinobi pouring their energy into the trap. He closed his eyes. He did not feel fear. He felt disappointment. This was Orochimaru's plan, a cage of rock and spiteful chakra. It was so limited. He raised a hand, his palm open. A miniature sun, no bigger than his fist, bloomed into existence, flooding the dark space with pure, golden light. It did not emit heat. It emitted a conceptual radiance, a decree of unmaking. He gently pushed it against the stone wall. Outside, the sound four grunted with effort, pouring their chakra into the twin barriers. Suddenly, a network of golden cracks appeared on the stone dome. Spreading like lightning, they were not cracks of force, but of dissolution. The rock wasn't breaking, it was being erased. What is this? Jirobo gasped, feeling the connection to his jutsu dissolving. My earth style, it's coming apart. With a silent, implosive shockwave of light, the entire earth dome prison vanished, turning into a cloud of inert dust. The four violet flames formation, its physical anchor gone, flickered and died. Naruto stood in the center of the dust cloud, unharmed, his expression one of mild annoyance. A cage is only a cage if you believe in walls, he said. His voice quiet but carrying across the stunned arena. He rose, not with a jump, but with a smooth, silent levitation, ascending 50 feet into the air until he hovered above the stadium. The chaos of the invasion spreading out beneath him like a macabre tapestry. His cause sight ignited, and the world resolved into a flowing, interconnected river of souls. He saw it all, the sickly, corrupt purple of Orochimaru's forces, their souls stained by the cursed seal. The reluctant, flickering crimson of the Suna shinobi, their spirits full of fear and conflict. And the bright, panicked whites and blues of Konoha's civilians and defenders, scattered and terrified. It was a masterpiece of chaos. Time to impose some order. His first act was for the innocent. He looked at the grandstands, where thousands of people lay sleeping, vulnerable to the battle that was about to rage. He extended a hand, and from it, a sheet of pure, golden light flowed like liquid glass. It expanded, solidified, and curved, forming a massive, semi-transparent dome of shimmering force that completely encapsulated the spectator area, sealing it off from the arena. It was a wall not of chakra, but of divine will. A declaration that said, "Here, there will be no harm." With the civilians secured, he became the battlefield commander. His consciousness expanded, his soul sense reaching out, touching the minds of the allies he had chosen. Tenten Higurashi grit her teeth, parrying a savage blow from a sound shinobi whose arms could stretch like rubber. Beside her, Neji Hyuga moved like a dancer, his gentle fist strikes finding their marks but being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Rock Lee was a green blur, but even his speed couldn't be everywhere at once. Team Guy was on the verge of being overrun. They were good, they were the best of their class. But they were Genin against a flood of seasoned, sadistic Chunin. It's no good, Tenten shouted, unsealing another scroll, her supply of weapons already dwindling. There are too many. Suddenly, a voice echoed in her mind, calm and clear as a temple bell. Tenten. She froze. It was Naruto's voice, but it wasn't spoken. It was felt. Your team is fighting inefficiently. You are 3 individuals. Fight as one. Before she could process the thought, the air around them shimmered, and a shower of new weapons materialized from motes of light, embedding themselves in the ground. They were kunai, spears, a fuma shuriken, even a pair of tonfa. They were all made of the same impossible, solid light material she had seen in their spar, each one a work of perfect, weightless art. Distribute the weapons, the voice commanded in her mind. Neji, the leader's soul light is frayed at his left knee, it is a structural weakness in his chakra network. Exploit it. Lee, your speed is a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Create a diversionary attack on their right flank in 3, 2, 1. A psychic pulse, a feeling of go, resonated through them. On pure instinct, they obeyed. Lee vanished, appearing on the right and drawing the attention of half the enemy squad. Tenten, her heart pounding with a craftsman's ecstasy, grabbed the light constructs. Their feel both weightless and indestructible, and began distributing them. Neji's Byakugan locked onto the enemy leader. He couldn't see a frayed soul light, but trusting the impossible command, he saw it, a subtle, almost invisible flaw in the man's chakra flow around his left knee, a vulnerability he never would have noticed otherwise. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. Neji roared, his attack no longer a general assault, but a focused, surgical strike. The result was instantaneous. The sound shinobi collapsed, their leader disabled, their formation broken. Team Guy, armed with Weapons that could not break and guided by an omniscient tactical mind, began to systematically dismantle their opposition. Tenten looked up towards the sky, at the small orange figure hovering like a distant sun. And her respect for his skill bled into pure, unadulterated awe. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a general. On the other side of the village, Hana Inuzuka ducked as the tail of a giant. Three-headed snake shattered the building she had been standing on. Her clan, the proud Inuzuka, were being decimated. Their coordinated beast-human attacks were useless against a creature the size of a mountain. They were scattered, disorganized, their primal connection lost in the terror and chaos. Fall back, lure it to the northern gate, she yelled, but her voice was lost in the earth-shaking hiss of the great serpent. A voice, deeper and more resonant than any alpha she had ever heard, suddenly filled the minds of every Inuzuka and every one of their Ninken partners. It was not a sound. It was a feeling of absolute authority, the call of the ultimate pack leader. The serpent is a single body with three minds. Its coordination is its weakness. The voice of Naruto resonated within them. Hana-san, you will lead the central assault. Kiba's mother, Soon, you will lead the left flank. Your objective is not the heads. It is the heart. The beast has a weak scale formation directly beneath its central jaw. All packs, synchronize your fang over fang. Do not attack until you feel my mark. A wave of calm certainty washed over the frantic clan. The Ninken stopped their panicked barking, their ears perked. Listening to this new, unseen alpha, Hana, her heart soaring with a strange, primal reverence, took her position. She saw the weak point the voice had described, a place she could now see with impossible clarity. They waited, every muscle coiled, every fang ready. Now, the single, mental command galvanized them. Dozens of spinning drills of chakra and fury, man and beast as one, launched into the air. It was not a chaotic assault. It was a single, perfect, synchronized strike, every trajectory angled precisely, all converging on a single point. Their combined power hit the weak spot under the snake's jaw like a single, massive spear. The giant serpent gave a gargantuan roar of agony and crashed to the ground, its reign of terror ended. Hana stood panting, looking at her clan, now reorganized and working with deadly efficiency to hunt down the remaining summons. She looked towards the center of the village, towards the source of that commanding, life-affirming voice. He had not just given them a strategy. He had reminded them of who they were. Temari cursed, her fan cutting a swath through three sound shinobi who had tried to ambush her. She and her brothers had been blackmailed into this invasion. Their father, the Kazekage, held hostage by Orochimaru's threats. But this was a disaster. The plan was falling apart. Konoha's defenses were scattered but vicious. Then, she saw it. The massive dome of light protecting the civilians. She felt the ground shake as the Inuzuka clan felled a giant summon with impossible coordination. She saw the tide of battle, which should have been a rout in their favor, being held and even pushed back. And at the center of it all, she saw the boy in orange, hovering against the sky like a vengeful star. He was commanding the entire battle. He was the defense of Konoha. She looked at her own Suna shinobi, their movements hesitant, their souls screaming with conflict. She looked at her brother Konkuro, fighting defensively, trying to protect their forces rather than attack. She made a choice. The future of Suna would not be as the dog of a snake. All Suna units, listen up. She yelled, her voice cutting through the din. Phase 2 of the plan is compromised. The Leaf's resistance is too strong. I'm enacting emergency protocol Gamma 7. Disengage and retreat to rendezvous point 3. Baki's eyes widened. Temari, what are you doing? There is no protocol Gamma 7. There is now, she said, her eyes hard as jade. To the Suna shinobi, a coded order to retreat was one thing. A formal, numbered protocol. L was an undeniable command from their field commander. It gave them the excuse they so desperately needed. The Suna forces began to pull back, a disciplined, strategic withdrawal. But they weren't just retreating. As they fell back, they began to skirmish with Orochimaru's sound forces, cutting them off, creating a barrier of chaos between the sound and the leaf. It was a subtle, brilliant betrayal, masked as a tactical retreat. Temari looked towards the sky. She had chosen her side. She had placed her bet on the boy who could command the sun. With the battlefield stabilized, Naruto finally descended. landing softly on the arena floor before the one who had orchestrated all this death. Orochimaru stood beside the reanimated forms of the first and second Hokage, their eyes dull, their skin cracked and gray. They were puppets, abominations pulled from their eternal rest. "You have amused me long enough, boy," Orochimaru hissed, his neck elongating as he studied Naruto. "But the games are over. Now, you will show me the true nature of your power." The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, moved. Wood style. Deep forest emergence. Massive trees erupted from the ground, their branches twisting into thorny spears aimed at Naruto. It was a pale imitation of the godlike power the first had once wielded, but still incredibly dangerous. Naruto didn't dodge. He held out a hand, and a wave of golden light washed over the approaching wood. The trees did not shatter or burn. The life force animating them was simply pacified. The wood stopped growing, the thorns softened, and the branches drooped, becoming inert. Lifeless timber that clattered harmlessly to the ground. "Your heresy perverts the very nature of life," Naruto said, his voice cold. He was looking not at the wooden puppets, but at Orochimaru. "You steal souls from their rest. You twist flesh into mockery. You are a sickness. Sickness. It is evolution." Orochimaru cackled, sending the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, forward. Water style. Water dragon bullet jutsu. A dragon of swirling water formed and shot towards Naruto. Naruto met it with a simple, focused beam of golden light from his fingertip. The light struck the water dragon, and the water, superheated in an instant, flashed into a harmless cloud of steam. He then turned his gaze upon the two legendary Hokage. His cause sight saw their souls, magnificent pillars of light, trapped and screaming within their defiled clay vessels, held by the foul, parasitic chakra of Orochimaru's curse. He would not fight his predecessors. He would free them. He brought his hands together in a single, unfamiliar seal, Sun's decree, hallowed purification. He didn't unleash a blast of energy. Instead, two gentle beams of warm, golden light shot from his eyes, striking the cursed seals embedded in the reanimated Hokage's heads. It was not an attack on their bodies, but on the jutsu that bound them. Hashirama and Tobirama screamed, a sound of agony as the Purification light warred with Orochimaru's corrupting seal. Their bodies began to crack and flake away, but their eyes, for a single moment, cleared. "Thank you," Hashirama's soul seemed to whisper. "Destroy him," Tobirama's spirit urged. Then, they crumbled into dust and ash, their souls finally freed to return to the Pure Land. Orochimaru stared, his snake-like eyes wide with disbelief and fury. You erased my jutsu. Impossible." He was about to lunge when he felt a presence behind him. Hiruzen Sarutobi, his old face set in lines of terrible resolve, had used the chaos to get past Orochimaru's guard. "Your ambition has cost this village enough, my student," Hiruzen whispered, his hands flashing through the seals of the one jutsu Orochimaru truly feared. "Your reign of terror ends today." Reaper Death Seal. The spectral, horrifying form of the Shinigami materialized behind Hiruzen. Orochimaru spun around, trying to escape, but he was too late. Hiruzen grabbed him, holding him fast. "I will take you with me." But Orochimaru, ever the serpent, managed to twist at the last second. The Reaper's ethereal hand shot through Hiruzen's torso, but it only managed to grasp Orochimaru's arms before pulling back. Orochimaru shrieked, a sound of inhuman agony, as he felt the life force, the very soul, of his arms being torn from his body. They went limp, turning a mottled, necrotic purple, utterly useless. Hiruzen coughed up blood, a sad smile on his face. He had failed to take Orochimaru's life, but he had taken something just as precious, his ability to weave jutsu. He looked at Naruto, his vision blurring. "The king must protect his people. The future is in your hands now, Naruto." And with that, the third Hokage, the god of shinobi, collapsed, his long watch finally over. Orochimaru, cradling his dead arms, his face a mask of pure agony and hatred, was pulled away by the last of his retreating forces. Naruto watched them go, a profound sorrow for the old man welling up in his chest. But the village was still burning. The people were still afraid. He rose one last time, high above the ravaged stadium, a small, solitary figure against a sky black with smoke. He closed his eyes, filtering out the chaos. Focusing on the heartbeat of his village. He drew in a deep breath and let his power flow out, not as a weapon, but as a benediction. A gentle, cascading wave of warm, golden light washed outwards from him, covering the entire village. It was the light of a perfect dawn. It did not magically heal severed limbs or bring back the dead, but it stabilized the critically wounded, closing gashes and preventing blood loss. It cleansed the air of smoke and the scent of death. And most importantly, it touched the souls of the survivors, washing away the terror and despair, replacing it with a profound, unshakable sense of peace and hope. Down below, a young Chunin, his arm broken, looked up from the body of his fallen comrade. He saw the boy bathed in heavenly light, a silent, sorrowful guardian holding back the darkness. A question, born of awe and terror and wonder, formed in his mind, a thought that echoed across the hearts of every single person in Konoha. What is he? Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Whispering Waterfall. In the week following the aborted invasion, Konoha was a village holding its breath. The physical rebuilding had begun with a grim, practiced efficiency born from centuries of conflict. The sounds of hammers and saws replaced the sounds of screaming, a percussive, ongoing rhythm of resilience. But beneath the surface of this industriousness, a deeper, more profound reconstruction was taking place. The village was rebuilding its understanding of the world. Naruto Uzumaki, the epicenter of this paradigm shift, found himself in a new kind of isolation. The glares of hatred he had known his entire life were gone, but they had been replaced by something far more alienating, a mixture of reverent awe and palpable fear. Villagers who once old have crossed the street to avoid him now fell silent as he passed, their eyes wide, their heads bowed. Shopkeepers who had refused him service now offered him their finest goods for free, their hands trembling. The pedestal was colder and lonelier than the gutter had ever been. He was no longer the demon brat. He was the village's resident miracle, its terrifying savior, a living deity walking their streets. And the distance between himself and them had become an unbridgeable chasm. He spent most of his days in the quiet stillness of the Hokage monument, sitting atop the carved stone head of his father, a man he barely knew. From here, he could watch the village, a mosaic of effort and sorrow, and feel the thrum of its collective soul. He felt the grief for the fallen, a heavy, gray blanket over the village. He felt the sorrow of his grandfather figure, the third Hokage, whose funeral had been a solemn, village-wide affair. Naruto had watched from a distance, unable to join in the communal mourning. His own grief was a quiet, private chamber inside his vast, sun-drenched soul, a place no one else could enter. It was on the 7th day that a new presence arrived in the village. A chakra signature so powerful and boisterous it felt like a crack of thunder in the somber quiet. Naruto felt it long before the man arrived at the monument, a soul light of fiery red and earthy brown, potent with raw life energy, worldly experience, and a profound, hidden sorrow. Quite a view. Naruto didn't turn. A tall man with a mane of wild white hair, red lines painted down his face, and a large scroll strapped to his back settled down beside him. He wore a horned forehead protector that read, oil, and he smelled of sake, toad oil, and long roads. Jiraiya, the toad sage, one of the 3 legendary Sannin, had come home. Heard you put on quite a show, Jiraiya said, his voice a low rumble. He wasn't looking at Naruto, but at the village below. My spies, reports were so outlandish I had to see for myself. They said a genin commanded the battle, walled off the stands with light, and healed the village with a single pulse of power. They said you erased Orochimaru's reanimation jutsu. They were accurate reports, Naruto replied, his voice a quiet murmur that was nearly lost in the wind. Jiraiya fell silent, studying the boy's profile. He had expected to find the Kyuubi's power running rampant, a child drunk on demonic chakra. Instead, he found this unnerving stillness, this ancient calm in the eyes of a 12-year-old. He reached out, not with his hand, but with a thread of his own sage chakra, trying to probe the boy's nature. The instant his energy touched Naruto's, it was like touching the surface of the sun. He felt no malice, no demonic rage, only a power so immense, so orderly, and so fundamentally different from chakra that his own sage energy recoiled in shock. That is not the 9 tails, Jiraiya breathed, his goofy persona melting away to reveal the sharp, analytical mind of an S-rank shinobi. What is it? What are you? I am trying to find that out, Naruto said simply. Jiraiya stared at him for a long, heavy minute. He, one of the most powerful ninja in the world, a master of countless jutsu, had absolutely nothing to teach this boy. Trying to train him would be like a candle trying to teach a star how to shine. But he was still Naruto's godfather, a duty he had neglected for 12 years. Perhaps he could not be a teacher, but he could be a guide. Your power, Jiraiya said, his tone shifting to something more serious. It feels ancient. Like something from before the time of the Sage of Six Paths. There are legends, old wives' tales mostly, of powers that predate chakra. The hero water of Tokigakure, the star eaters of Hoshigakure, they're all dismissed as myths. But after what I've just felt from you, I'm beginning to wonder. He stood up, dusting off his pants. I can't teach you how to use your power. But I can take you to places where you might find answers. Our first stop. Tokigakure, the village hidden by a waterfall. Officially, we're on a long-term reconnaissance and training mission. Unofficially, we're going on a history lesson. Naruto looked up at the legendary Sannin, at the genuine offer in his soul, and nodded. It was time to leave the pedestal behind and search for the truth of the sun-drenched silence within him. The journey into the lands surrounding the land of waterfalls was a descent into a world of overwhelming, primordial green. The dry, stark beauty of the desert was a distant memory, replaced by a suffocating humidity that clung to the skin like a wet blanket. They traveled through forests so ancient and dense that the sunlight struggled to pierce the canopy, leaving the foe rest floor in a perpetual state of emerald twilight. The air was a symphony of life. The ceaseless drone of a million insects, the chirps and calls of unseen birds, the rustle of hidden creatures in the undergrowth. The world smelled of rich, damp earth, decaying leaves, and the sweet, heavy perfume of exotic blossoms that bloomed and died in a single day. Their dynamic was not one of master and student. It was one of mutual curiosity. Jiraiya, in an attempt to fill the role of a guardian, would tell Naruto stories of the world, of the great villages, of the politics and wars that had shaped their era. He spoke of his travels, of the strange characters and bizarre jutsu he had encountered. He was trying to give Naruto a context for the world he was now such a powerful part of. Naruto, in turn, would listen quietly and then make observations that would stop Jiraiya in his tracks. The life energy in this part of the forest is older, he would say, placing a hand on the moss-covered trunk of a giant tree. It feels sleepy. Or, while crossing a rushing river, the water here is happy. It wants to get to the ocean. Jiraiya, a sage who could feel the energy of nature, felt it as a vast, undifferentiated sea of power. Naruto seemed to perceive its every mood, its every nuance, as if nature itself were a person he was having a quiet conversation with. It was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. After a week of travel, they began to hear it. At first, it was a low, distant rumble, a vibration felt more in the bones than heard with the ears. But as they drew closer, it grew into a deafening, continuous roar that drowned out all other sound. They arrived at a deep, wide canyon, and before them was a sight of breathtaking majesty. A waterfall, miles wide, plunged thousands of feet into a misty chasm below. It was not just a waterfall, it was a living wall of water, a curtain separating the world from whatever lay behind it. And nestled into the rock faces on either side of the colossal cascade, almost hidden within the permanent veil of mist, was Tokigakure. The village was a marvel of architecture, a series of dwellings, bridges, and platforms built directly into the vertical cliff faces, all connected by a dizzying network of stairs and elevators. It was a place of perpetual dampness, where moss grew on every surface and the roar of the falls was the constant, unchanging soundtrack of life. Their arrival was met with immediate, polite, but firm suspicion. They were escorted to the village leader's office, a large cavern behind a shimmering curtain of water. Shibuki, the leader of Taki, was a young man who seemed crushed by the weight of the position he held. His soul light was a flickering, anxious green, a clear indicator of his stress and fear. Lord Jiraiya, an honor, Shibuki said, bowing low, but I must confess, your unannounced arrival is surprising. Just touring the neighborhood, Jiraiya said with a disarming grin. I've always been F.A. Shenaded by the legends of your village's hero water. A miraculous elixir that grants immense power. I was hoping you could satisfy an old man's curiosity. Shibuki's smile became strained. Ah, the old stories. I'm afraid they are just that, Lord Jiraiya. Stories for tourists. He was a poor liar. His soul pulsed with a spike of defensive fear. Naruto, who had been standing silently beside Jiraiya, let his own senses drift. He ignored the leader, the guards, the political dance. He reached out, searching for a resonance, a power source that might be connected to his own. He didn't find one, but he did find something else. A single soul, hidden away deep in the highest part of the village. It was a bright, vibrant, mint green light, like his own, a beacon of immense life energy. But it was caged, flickering with loneliness and a desperate, unfulfilled yearning for connection. A fellow Jinchuriki. The treasure you are hiding is very lonely, Naruto said quietly. The room fell silent. Shibuki froze, his face paling. Jiraiya looked from Naruto to Shibuki, his eyes narrowing as he finally understood. The hero water wasn't an elixir. It was a person. He is our village's greatest secret, and our greatest burden. Shibuki admitted, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Her name is Fu. She is the Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails. We keep her isolated for her own safety, and for ours. Guided by the bright, sad pull of Fu's soul, Naruto found her. She was housed in a large, comfortable suite of rooms carved into the very top of the highest cliff, with a balcony that offered a stunning, vertigo-inducing view of the waterfall. It was a beautiful prison. Two stoic Taki-jonin stood guard outside her door, their expressions grim. Jiraiya began to negotiate with the guards, but Naruto ignored them. He walked to the solid stone door, closed his eyes, and focused. He didn't try to hear through the door. He reached out with his own soul, sending a gentle, inquisitive pulse of warmth and curiosity towards the bright, caged light within. Hello, it's very bright in there. Are you okay? Inside the room, Fu, a young girl with mint green hair and orange eyes, was lying on her bed, listlessly tracing the patterns on the ceiling. Her life was a repeating cycle of boring, lonely days. People avoided her. They feared her. The only company she had was the great, insect-like Biju in her mind, Chome. Whose own longing for the open sky echoed her own. Suddenly, she felt it. A gentle, warm touch against her soul. It wasn't the fearful prodding of the village elders or the angry presence of an enemy. It was warm, like sunlight. It felt friendly. Who's there? She projected back, a thought more than a word. Outside, Naruto smiled. My name is Naruto. It's loud out here because of the waterfall. But the silence outside your door is much louder, isn't it? Fu sat bolt upright. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. He understood. This person, whoever he was, understood. Naruto turned to a stunned Jiraiya and the two guards. I am going in. The door is sealed from this side, boy, one of the guards grunted. Doors are for people who can't walk through walls, Naruto replied simply. He placed a hand on the solid rock face beside the door. A soft, golden light enveloped him. He did not break the rock. He did not teleport. He simply phased through it, his body becoming momentarily translucent. Like a figure seen through sunlit water. He emerged on the other side, in Fu's room, the light fading from him. Fu stared, her orange eyes wide with wonder. He was just a boy, a little younger than her, dressed in a bright orange jumpsuit that seemed absurdly cheerful. But his eyes were ancient. And his smile was the first genuine smile she had seen in years. Hi, he said, I thought you might like some company. Chome, the seven-tailed horned beetle, stirred within her soulscape. Its insectoid senses flared, not with aggression, but with intense curiosity. The boy's energy, it was like the sun. It was pure life. The Biju, a being of nature, felt an instinctual pull towards it, a calming influence that soothed the chafing irritation of its seal. Fu's reply was a choked sob of relief. Her desperate goal had always been to make 100 friends. In that moment, she felt like she had finally found the first. Their bond was instantaneous, a resonance betway. Two lonely souls who carried worlds within them. For the rest of an afternoon that felt like a lifetime, they talked. Fu, bursting with the bottled-up energy of years of solitude, told him everything. About her dream of seeing the world, about the other Biju she could sometimes feel in her dreams, about the burden of being feared. Naruto listened patiently, sharing his own experiences of being an outcast. Of the pedestal he now found himself on. For the first time, each of them was speaking to an equal, a true peer who understood the fundamental condition of their existence. As twilight painted the mist outside in hues of purple and orange, Fu's excitement turned conspiratorial. "There's something I want to show you," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Something nobody else knows about. Not even Shibuki." She led Naruto and a deeply intrigued Jiraiya to a hidden elevator that descended deep into the rock. It opened into a narrow, damp tunnel that sloped downwards. The roar of the waterfall grew impossibly loud, until it was a physical pressure against their bodies. The tunnel ended, and they stepped out into a vast, dry cavern behind the waterfall itself. The view was breathtaking. They were looking out at the world through a screen of roaring, plunging white water, the light splintering into 1,000 dancing rainbows. But the true marvel was the cavern itself. It was filled with the ruins of a city, but a city unlike any they had ever seen. The buildings were seamless structures of a strange, dark metal that did not rust, their geometry alien and precise. There were no doors or windows, only elegant archways, and the walls were covered in etched diagrams that were not maps of the land, but of the stars. "I found this place when I was little," Fu said in awe. "I come here when I feel trapped." Jiraiya ran a hand over a metal wall, his expression one of utter bewilderment. This predates everything. This is not shinobi construction." Naruto, however, was not bewildered. He was home. He walked towards a central, raised dais, his eyes tracing the symbols carved into its surface. He could read them. They were the hieroglyphs of his ancestors, the divine grammar of Kemet. "Here fell the sky fire. Here the children of Aten began their watch. Here we sealed the path and began the great retreat." It was a fragment of a story, a clue to his own past. A breadcrumb on a trail that stretched back millennia. He reached out, his fingers tracing the Onkan sun symbol on the altar. The moment his skin made contact, the stone pulsed with a faint, dormant energy. Recognizing his lineage, it was at that exact moment that two new presences appeared, their chakra signatures so cold and malevolent they felt like shards of ice in the warm, humid air. Naruto and Jiraiya spun around. Silhouetted against the roaring white curtain of the waterfall stood two figures in black cloaks adorned with ominous red clouds. One was a towering giant of a man with blue skin, gill-like facial markings, and a massive, bandaged sword on his back. The other was smaller, his movements fluid and silent, his face an impassive mask from which two spinning, blood-red Sharingan eyes glowed with a terrible light. Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki. Kisami's lips curled back from his sharpened, shark-like teeth in a wide, predatory grin. He gestured with his head towards a terrified Fu. Well, look what we have here. A 7 tails, just like the intel said." His gaze then shifted to Naruto, and his grin widened. "And what's this? It seems we get 2 for the price of 1. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Requiem of Light and Water. The cavern behind the waterfall, a place of ancient, silent wonder only moments before, was now a crucible of suffocating killing intent. The air grew thick and cold, the joyous symphony of rainbows cast by the water curtain suddenly seeming like the fractured stained glass of a desecrated cathedral. The two figures in red clouded cloaks did not move, yet their presence warped the very atmosphere. Kisame Hoshigaki's was a tangible, physical pressure, a crushing weight of bloodlust and predatory glee that promised a gruesome, violent death. Itachi Uchiha's was infinitely more terrifying. It was a psychic void, an abyss of chilling calm that seemed to absorb all light, all hope, all sound, leaving behind nothing but the certainty of utter annihilation. Fu let out a small, terrified gasp, her instinctive flight response kicking in. She took a half-step back, her mind screaming at her to run, to hide. But a gentle warmth on her shoulder stopped her. It was Naruto's hand. He hadn't turned to look at her, his gaze fixed on the two Akatsuki members, but the message conveyed through his touch was absolute: "Stay with me. You are safe." The panic in her chest subsided, replaced by a trembling, newfound resolve. Jiraiya moved with a speed that belied his age, positioning himself between the two young Jinchuriki and the S-rank threat. His jovial, wandering sage persona vanished, stripped away to reveal the hard, granite core of the legendary Sannin. His face was a grim mask of focus, his senses flaring, analyzing the enemy. Itachi Uchiha. Jiraiya's voice was a low growl, devoid of its usual mirth. Konoha's prodigal son, turned kinslayer. And Kisame Hoshigaki, the monster of the hidden mist. The Akatsuki certainly don't send their B-listers. This is a bit above a genin's pay grade, wouldn't you say? Kisami's grin widened, a horrifying crescent of needle-sharp teeth. Jiraiya of the Sannin, my sword, Samahata, has been craving a taste of a legend. And too little Jinchuriki for dessert. He chuckled, a sound like rocks grinding together. It's a veritable feast. The bandaged sword on his back twitched, letting out a low, eager chittering sound that was horribly, unnervingly alive. Itachi remained silent, his Sharingan eyes, 3 black tomo spinning slowly in a sea of blood, fixed on Naruto. He was not looking at a boy. He was analyzing a phenomenon, a piece on the board that had appeared from nowhere and had rewritten the entire game. The reports of the Konoha invasion had been precise, yet unbelievable. Now, seeing the boy in person, Itachi felt it. A power that did not register as chakra, a presence that felt older and more fundamental than the Biju he was tasked with hunting. We are here for the 7 tails, Itachi said, his voice a monotone, each word perfectly level, perfectly cold. The 9 tails is a bonus. Hand them over, Jiraiya, and you may be permitted to live. You know, for a guy who murdered his entire family, you've still got a sense of humor, Jiraiya shot back, sinking into a low, powerful stance. Ninja art. Needle Jizo. His wild white hair shot forward, hardening into a shell of microscopic needles, a defensive dome that completely shielded himself, Naruto, and Fu. It was an S-rank defensive jutsu, a barrier of steel-hard hair capable of repelling almost any physical attack. Kisame laughed. Cute trick, but let's see how it handles this. Water style. Water shark bomb jutsu. Kisame slammed his hands together. The very air, thick with the mist from the waterfall, seemed to coalesce at his command. A colossal shark made of churning, high-pressure water formed in the cavern, its maw opening wide as it shot towards the needle dome. But before Jutsu could even cross the halfway point of the cavern, Naruto acted. He raised a single, calm hand. Heka decree. Inversion. He did not shout. The words were a soft murmur, a quiet instruction to reality. A beam of pure, golden light, no thicker than a pencil, shot from his fingertip and struck the water shark. There was no explosion. Instead, the water that composed the shark instantly reversed its directional flow. The creature of animated water turned on itself, collapsing into a chaotic vortex before shooting back towards Kisame with twice its original speed. Kisami's eyes widened in shock. He was forced to leap out of the way as his own jutsu slammed into the cavern wall behind him, the sheer force of the impact shaking the entire mountain, sending a shower of rock and debris from the ceiling. Jiraiya's hair retracted, his own eyes wide with shock. He had seen Naruto's power before, but to see it so effortlessly deconstruct and reverse an A-rank jutsu from a shinobi of Kisami's caliber was something else entirely. It wasn't a counter jutsu. It was a complete negation of the principles of ninjutsu itself. Fascinating, Kisame purred, his bloodlust now mingled with genuine curiosity. You didn't cancel it, you stole it. Samahata is going to love you. He ripped the massive, bandaged sword from his back. As the wrappings fell away, the weapon was revealed in all its grotesque glory. Samahata was not a sword. It was a living creature. A mass of razor-sharp gray scales that writhed and shifted, its hilt a fanged maw that opened and closed eagerly. It was a being that fed on chakra. Now, let's try something a little bigger. Kisame yelled, a wild joy in his eyes. He held Samahata aloft, and the great sword seemed to act as a conduit, drawing upon the immense ambient moisture from the waterfall. Water style. Exploding water colliding wave. A literal ocean erupted from nothingness, a colossal, churning wall of water that filled the entire cavern, threatening to crush them under thousands of tons of pressure. It was a jutsu meant to reshape landscapes, let alone win battles. From beside Naruto, Fu felt a surge of defiant power. I can help, she yelled. Her body glowed with the mint-green chakra of the 7 tails. Wings, like those of a beetle, sprouted from her back. Secret jutsu. Blinding scales powder. She beat her new wings, releasing a cloud of shimmering, iridescent dust that shot towards the tidal wave. But it was like throwing sand at the ocean. Jiraiya's face was grim. He began flashing through hand signs for a massive Earth-style wall, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. Naruto remained calm. He looked at the onrushing wall of water, an unstoppable force of nature summoned by a monster. He shook his head, a gesture of faint disappointment. So much noise. He raised both hands, palms facing the wave. He did not create a shield. He did not try to reverse it. He unleashed a pure, conceptual wave of his own power, a silent, invisible pulse of golden light carrying a single, simple command: evaporate. The effect was instantaneous and utterly surreal. The colossal wall of water, just feet from them, dissolved. It did not splash. It did not create a cloud of steam. One moment, an ocean was about to crash down upon them. The next, it was simply gone. The air in the cavern grew momentarily warmer and more humid, the only evidence that the jutsu had ever existed. The cavern was plunged into a stunned silence, broken only by the ceaseless roar of the real waterfall outside. Kisame stood frozen, his jaw slack, Samahata vibrating a mixture of hunger and something that felt almost like fear. Itachi's perpetually impassive face, for the first time, betrayed a flicker of something. It was not shock. It was the deep, unsettling feeling of a master strategist realizing that the fundamental rules of the game he was playing had just been rendered completely obsolete. Illusion, it has to be, Kisame muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. It is not an illusion. Itachi's voice was a flat, chilling whisper. He turned his head slightly, his Sharingan eyes locking onto Jiraiya. He had identified the immediate, conventional threat. You will be removed first. Itachi's eyes changed. The three tomo spun, merging into a three-pointed, bladed pinwheel. The Mangekyo Sharingan, Tsukuyomi. Jiraiya's eyes widened in horror. He knew what this was. The ultimate genjutsu, a world of illusion where the caster had absolute control over space, time, and pain. There was no defense. He braced his mind for an eternity of torment. But the world did not change. The cavern remained. The roar of the waterfall continued. Jiraiya looked around, confused. Itachi was staring, not at Jiraiya, but past him, at Naruto. He had not targeted the Sannin. He had targeted the boy. And it had failed. From Naruto's perspective, the world had flickered for a nanosecond. He had felt a foreign consciousness, cold and sharp as obsidian, try to latch onto his own. He saw, with his cause sight, a complex, barbed structure of illusory chakra attempting to override his perception of reality. It was a lie, a beautifully crafted, intricate, and powerful lie. But his bloodline power, the Otten's gaze, was the perception of absolute, fundamental truth. To him, the Tsukuyomi was like a child's crayon drawing scrawled over a masterpiece. It had no purchase. It held no power. He didn't break the genjutsu. He simply ignored it, and the lie unraveled from its own lack of a foundation. Your eyes see shadows of the truth, Naruto said, his voice holding no malice. Only a clinical pity. My eyes see the soul itself. Your illusions are irrelevant. This was the moment the battle truly changed. Itachi Uchiha, the man who could defeat any opponent with a single glance. The master of a perfect, inescapable genjutsu, had just met someone upon whom his ultimate power had no effect whatsoever. Itachi's mind, a fortress of cold logic, reeled from the impossibility of it. He reacted with flawless shinobi instinct. If the esoteric fails, the physical prevails. Amaterasu. A tear of black blood rolled down his cheek. His gaze locked onto Naruto. A point in space just in front of Naruto's chest spontaneously ignited with black flames, flames said to be as hot as the sun, flames that could burn for 7 days and 7 nights, that could consume fire itself. Naruto watched the black flames bloom. He felt their nature, a jutsu that imposed the concept of burning onto reality. Another decree, but this one was crude, angry, and finite. He met it with his own. He raised a hand, and from it flowed a stream of pure, golden light that wrapped around the black flames, smothering them. It was not water or wind. It was a flow of pure order, of purity. The chaotic, all-consuming nature of the Amaterasu could not exist in the face of this absolute principle. The black flames did not flicker out. They were unwritten from existence, leaving not even a scorch mark on the air. For the first time since the Uchiha massacre, Itachi felt a cold knot of something that was almost fear. All his ultimate techniques, the twin pillars of his power, had been neutralized as if they were academy-level jutsu. "Kisame," Itachi commanded, his voice tight. "Engage. I will support." Kisame needed no further encouragement. With a roar of savage joy, he charged, Samahata held high. Jiraiya, recovering from the shock of the failed Tsukuyomi, met him head-on. Sage Art. Toad Oil Bomb. Jiraiya spewed a jet of flammable oil, igniting it with a fire seal tag, creating a massive inferno. Kisame simply powered through it, Samahata absorbing the chakra from the flames, his skin steaming but unharmed. The two legends crashed together in a blur of motion. A battle of raw sage power versus monstrous strength and chakra absorption. Naruto turned to Fu. The girl was staring, her mouth agape, her mind a whirlwind of awe and disbelief. "Fu," Naruto's voice was calm, cutting through her shock. "You are not a liability. You are my partner. I need you in the air. Be my eyes. Distract him. Can you do that?" The simple words, "my partner," were the most powerful jutsu she had ever experienced. They filled her with a strength she never knew she possessed. Her mint green wings beat powerfully, lifting her into the air. Yes, Naruto focused on Itachi, who was already moving. His hands a blur of signs. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. Itachi unleashed a volley of fireballs, shuriken hidden within them. Fu, from her vantage point, saw the glint of the hidden steel. "Shuriken inside," she yelled. Naruto didn't need the warning, but her participation was the point. He moved. It was the way of the sunbeam. To Itachi's Sharingan, which could track the fastest of movements. It looked impossible. One moment, Naruto was there. The next, he had vanished in a silent flash of light, reappearing directly behind Itachi, his hand outstretched, his fingertips glowing with a soft, golden light. Itachi's prodigious reflexes saved him. He spun, a kunai already in his hand, parrying the blow. But the force of the impact was bizarre. It wasn't strong, but a strange, disruptive energy traveled up his arm, momentarily numbing it. Naruto's taijutsu was designed to disrupt the chakra network, a perfect counter to a shinobi's physical prowess. What followed was a deadly, silent ballet. Naruto would attack, moving in flashes of light, his strikes precise and surgical. Itachi, with the predictive power of his Sharingan, would defend and counter, his movements economical and flawless. It was a battle of two prodigies, one who could see the future by a fraction of a second, and one who moved so fast he seemed to be in multiple places at once. High above, Fu provided support. "He's molding chakra in his left hand," she'd call out, or, "he's going to use a clone." She wove through the air, spitting out streams of sticky, binding silk from her mouth, a secret jutsu of the seven tails. Trying to corral Itachi and limit his movements. The Akatsuki member was forced to constantly adjust, to deal with a threat from both the ground and the air. Meanwhile, Jiraiya and Kisame's battle was a brutal slugfest. Rasengan. Jiraiya roared, slamming a spinning sphere of pure chakra into Kisame's chest. The force sent the shark man flying, but Samahata absorbed the brunt of the damage. And Kisame rose, laughing, a deep gouge in his cloak but his body already healing. "More. Give me more," Kisame yelled, swinging his massive sword, forcing Jiraiya back. Naruto saw that the battle was a stalemate. A drain on his allies. It was time to end it. He made a decision. He would remove the pawn to check the king. He broke off his engagement with Itachi in a flash of light. Reappearing halfway across the cavern, directly in the path of a charging Kisame. "You," Kisame roared in delight, "finally come to play with me yourself." Naruto simply raised his hand. He began to draw in the air with a finger of pure, golden light, tracing a complex, glowing hieroglyph. It was a symbol of containment, of order, of absolute stasis. "What's this? Pretty pictures," Kisame mocked, charging forward. Samahata eager to devour this strange, delicious energy. "Heka seal. The pharaoh's quarantine," Naruto said, his voice resonating with an ancient authority. He pushed the completed, glowing hieroglyph forward. It expanded into a two-dimensional plane of golden light. Kisame crashed into it head first. He did not break through it. He did not bounce off it. He simply passed into it. The plane of light wrapped around him, folding in on itself with impossible geometry until it formed a perfect, seamless, golden cube, maybe 10 feet on each side. Inside, Kisame was frozen. His face locked in a snarl of furious confusion, his body held in a single moment of time. He was not dead, not injured, not unconscious. He was simply paused. A monster in a timeless exhibit case. The golden cube drifted silently to the ground, landing with a soft thud. Jiraiya stared, panting, his mind reeling. The sheer, casual godhood of that technique was more terrifying than any killing jutsu he had ever witnessed. With the brutish half of the Akatsuki duo neutralized, a profound silence fell over the cavern, the roar of the waterfall the only remaining sound. Itachi stood perfectly still, his Sharingan fixed on the golden cube, then on Naruto. The calculation in his eyes was cold and swift. He was alone. His partner was defeated in a way he couldn't comprehend. And he was facing a boy whose power operated on a level beyond his understanding. A strategic retreat was the only logical option. But Naruto was not finished. He turned his full attention to the Uchiha prodigy. There would be no more fighting. Only truth. Itachi Uchiha, Naruto said, his voice soft but carrying an immense weight. He took a slow step forward. I have looked into your soul. I see the lies you tell yourself. I see the mask you wear. And I see the truth you hide beneath it. Itachi's body tensed, a flicker of genuine shock registering on his face. I see a bottomless ocean of grief, Naruto continued. Each word a carefully placed stone dropped into the placid pool of Itachi's composure. I see the ghosts of everyone you ever loved. I see the face of your father, your mother, your clan. And I hear their voices. Screaming a single question. Naruto took another step. Fu had landed silently behind him. Jiraiya watched, holding his breath. But their screams are not as loud as your own, Naruto said, his eyes now glowing with a soft, empathetic golden light, looking directly into Itachi's soul. You project the image of a cold-blooded killer, but your Ka tells a different story. It tells the story of a boy who was forced to slaughter his own heart to protect something precious. Itachi's hands, hidden in his sleeves, clenched into fists. His perfect composure was beginning to crack. Naruto stopped, now only a few feet from him. He delivered the final, devastating blow. He did not raise his voice. He whispered the question that his Ka's sight had given him. So tell me, Itachi. Uchiha, why does your soul scream with the name, Sasuke? The name, spoken with such profound, knowing sadness, shattered Itachi's fortress of solitude. His Mangekyo Sharingan wavered, the carefully constructed walls of ice around his heart cracked. This boy saw everything. Not just his actions, but the reasons. The agony. The sacrifice. It was a violation more profound, more intimate than any physical attack. He could not fight this. He could not kill this truth. With a speed born of desperation, Itachi made a move. He shunshined to the golden cube, placing a hand on it. A complex, spatial jutsu enveloped him in the contained form of Kisame. This is not over. Itachi's voice was a strained whisper, the first hint of emotion he had shown. Then, with a swirl of warping space, he was gone. The cavern was silent once more. The battle was over. Fu stared at the spot where the Akatsuki had vanished, then looked at Naruto, her orange eyes shining with an emotion so powerful it was almost worship. He hadn't just fought them. He had understood them. He had protected her, trusted her, and then defeated two of the world's most wanted criminals with a power that was as compassionate as it was absolute. Jiraiya leaned heavily against a rock, a long, ragged gash on his arm from Samahada's scales. He looked at Naruto, then at Fu, then at the ancient, star-faring ruins around them. Well, the Sannin said, a weary grin returning to his face. That complicates things. He looked at Fu. Your village, they can't protect you. The Akatsuki knows where you are now. They'll be back. Fu looked down, the brief elation of victory giving way to a familiar fear. She'll come with us, Naruto stated, not asking. She will be safer in Konoha. Jiraiya nodded. My thoughts exactly. He turned to Fu. What do you say, kid? Fancy a trip to the land of fire? Fu looked at Jiraiya, then her gaze settled on Naruto. On her partner. On the first true friend she had ever had. The boy who had quieted the loneliness in her soul and stood against monsters for her. Her answer was not a word, but a radiant, cheerful smile that outshone all the rainbows in the cavern. Chapter 6 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.